Good evening and welcome to the DPX. I'm Larry Vogel and I will be your host tonight. I think we'll go ahead and we will get started. So welcome to our April 8th. I'm looking right at that 11 and I said 8. Right. Welcome to our April 11th, 2024 DPX meeting. For a lot of you know that I do 2 DPX meetings every month. So on the second Thursday, which is tonight, is the regular DPX meeting. And the other one we do on the last Thursday is the DPX AI meeting. And so, again, a lot of people who have been jumping into the DPX AI meeting, I think there are people who are more curious sometimes, and it's weird when we start talking about AI, it's like it's not one thing anymore because now there's artificial intelligence as far as tools in Photoshop now, and there's a weird thing about some of the clubs and some of the competitions and things have some interesting rules about how you can use AI and how you can't use it. And like so far this year, the rule at the fair is you can use generative fill, but you can't use a prompt. And so I thought that was a weird way to kind of structure, like, okay, you can use AI, but you can't talk to it. But it was, and my feeling about it is that the tool, if you just make a circle and use it to retouch something, 90% of the time, it does a great job. It does a better job than content aware fill. But when it doesn't do a good job and you want to tell it what to do, then to me it seems like if you're more interested in having the photographer more directly involved in the outcome of their image, I would think then the prompt would be an important thing. Oh, this has got to be Don Lyons signed in as the deceased O.J. Simpson. So.
O.J. Simpson. You always when they
Don always
if
shows
it don't
up.
Fit, you got to acquit.
Right. But if it's Photoshop, all you have to do is resize.
There you go.
All right, O.J. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, brother.
So yeah, I think the idea of whether you should be using the tool with or without a prompt is kind of meaningless. But I think the idea behind it, and some of you who belong to camera clubs might know, is that if you're going to write, I'll put the right one back on the screen so everybody knows it's in the right place. If you're going to use the prompt part of it, I think the deal is that they're trying to restrict the usage where I'm going to put a circle in the middle of a field and say add a horse, right? So AI will drop a horse in there. So without a prompt, you'll never get AI to create a horse in the middle of your field. It will only work kind of like content aware fill, but on steroids. It's just like amazing what it does for retouching. So anyhow, I think the control is to try to keep people from using prompting to add things to their photograph that weren't in your camera, or you didn't take the photograph of the horse, because you could always grab a horse from another image and drop it in. So that's kind of the school of thought behind it. We've been talking a lot about it on Monday morning sessions. So for those of you that don't know, again, announcements. I do Photoshop on the fly. I got to just cross that out and just say 2 hour. 10 a.m. every Monday morning, we do a 2 hour Photoshop on the fly session where we can actually spend more time. We do less critiquing because a lot of images don't come in, but we spend more time sort of going through technical things in Photoshop or processing or talking about those aesthetics and about the image and stuff. So there's a rather lengthy link here, but if you use the GoToMeeting thing, you can just drop in the meeting ID number, or you can go to my website, lavogel.com, and there's a on the fly page there, and there's a link on that page that'll get you to the Monday morning events also. Or send me an email and say, hey, I didn't catch that, so be sure to send me the link, and I'll send you the link. Only other announcement I have, and I keep putting this out, and I've not even sent out any follow-up information, but I've been doing the Pismo Beach workshop for a lot of years, and we're going back this year again also. So in May 17th through the 20th, there's a YouTube video. So if you go look for my name in Pismo Beach workshop, it should come up. And it will show you a lot of the locations we're going to go to. So if you're interested in seeing where we're going to go, you can go there and check it out. There's 2 spots left. And so if you're interested, probably should do it soon. And I think that's kind of everything I'm going to share for the day. Does anybody have anything they want to add to announcements for the group with anything that you've got going on or workshops you've attended that you would say, be sure you get on the list and do this one, or maybe you should stay away. Don't go to this one. I don't know. I will say another announcement that I will say. So, as most of you know, I think the deadline for the San Diego Fair is the 15th, is it? Does anybody know that date? Nobody knows. Yeah, 15th.
Yep.
Yeah. So the 15th is the deadline for entries to the fair. So if you're interested, make sure you do that. I would advise people not to wait till the very last minute. I've heard horror stories about, 10, 11 o'clock on the last day, the site crashing.
I think it's 8 p.m.
It's 8 p.m. Okay, there you go.
I believe it's 8 p.m., yeah.
If you wait too late, you can get into a crash situation and maybe have a hard time and things locking up and acting goofy. So try not to wait till the last minute. Another thing
but
for
Lois pointed out this year it closes the online closes at 8 p.m.
Yeah, that's what David
day.
just said. Yeah, so it's early this time. Maybe that's to keep everybody from having to stay up till midnight.
Keep them honest.
The other thing I always push for the fair is for if you haven't been to the workshop programs, they're great. There's a lot there. I think Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, great to get there. And man, you can check in at the beginning of the day and stay for the whole day if you want to. They usually start sometime around noon and run till about 5 o'clock. So they have a lot of great programs. And I don't know if they've put the schedule up on the site yet, but you can go there and check out and see who's presenting on which days. So if you want to make a plan to be there, I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. Osia's here. Welcome, Osia. She said.
Hi there. Thanks.
She said.
Hello.
All right.
No, I'm just muted. I'm not quiet.
You're a mutant. You're what? Never mind. All right.
That's it.
So
what were you talking about?
we're just talking about the fair deadline coming up on the 15th and the workshop program there. So I don't know if they have them all posted yet, but it's a great thing to if you're interested in taking some workshops. They always have a pretty good program, and usually it's an all-day thing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's some great presenters doing some classes, so make sure you check it out. And any other announcements for anybody else? I kind of interrupted everybody with the fair thing, but anybody have anything they want to share with the group before we move on? All right. If you think of something in the middle of the meeting, go, oh yeah, I wanted to share this, go ahead and say. I was just going to say, if you want to put anything, Dan's reminding me, I knew your name sounded familiar. So Dan's reminding me he's on the Pismo Beach workshop. So excellent. If anybody wants to put anything, a website or something you want to direct people to, you can put that into the chat, and people can check out the chat. So that's just the little speaking bubble thing at the top there. All right. So the way that we usually do this is I put the images into folders as I receive them. So we look at them in the order that I got them. And I'll say, congratulations. You have all beat Paul Lawrence to the front of the line because Paul's not here today. And so Paul usually sends his images in way early, and he's usually first in line. But so this month, Joan is going to be our first person up. And thank you, Joan, for resending those because these are much better size now. So sometimes the things happen when you're sizing photos and you don't quite see it. And then I sometimes don't see it till the last minute and then realize, oh, these things are only like, tiny things. So we try to, in fact, on the meetup site, there's a little bit of directions there about how to size the files. So it's great for them to be at least like somewhere around 2,000 pixels, which sounds big because most of the time, most juried shows are looking at 1024 or somewhere in their 1200 range. But it's nice for this to have them a little bit larger because then we can zoom in and look at things if we're going to open them up in Photoshop and talk about them. So, Joan, want to tell us about your image and we'll...
Well, today I printed something for the first time and it came out very light, and I realized that my monitor was not calibrated right. And so everything I've been doing for the last month or so was too light and not saturated enough. Now, on my screen before, when I sent this to you, it looked entirely different. It was much more saturated and darker. So what can I say?
Well, you could become an advocate for monitor calibration.
There you go.
Even then,
Right. I went in today and tried to monitor my, I have a Mac, and I followed the rules, and it did change. So I'm going down to print, or where my computer is, to print tomorrow
Oh,
to
okay.
see if I get a different result. But anyway,
all right. Well, and I will
that's the
say, I
story.
mean, interesting.
All three.
Before we even get into this one, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna open this in Photoshop and just sort of give an example, an interesting idea about what we see on the screen versus what comes out of a printer. And this is all and also when we do these online meetings, and what I'm seeing on my screen and how it gets translated through the online program, and then how you end up seeing it at your end. I have, like, usually if I'm doing a webinar, I usually set up my laptop to the side. Part of it's for just in case one computer crashes, I can still, be there on the other computer. But also I kind of like watch to make sure how, if things are lagging way behind, or all that stuff. And really pretty true to what I see on my screen is what shows up on my laptop, which is going through the whole GoToMeeting program and all that. So I'm fairly confident that what we're seeing on the screen should be close. I'm not going to say it's ever exact, but we're always dealing with that, how devices, interpret files. And even like with camera clubs that are using projectors, everybody always will look at an image on the projector and go, oh, it looks a little more contrasty, not bright enough, too dark, all those kind of things. It's just the nature of, how images get transferred from one medium to another. And
Right.
even when I get ready to print, depending on my paper. Now, so when we talk about calibrations, you have a camera calibration. You can employ a camera calibration. You can employ again not a calibration, but you can employ boy, I just lost the word. I'll come up with it. Anyhow, in Camera Raw and Lightroom, you can plug in and it usually defaults to a particular like Adobe Color or one of those others, or you can create custom profiles. There it is, profile. Takes a village. All right, so so that's, and then when you then bring it into the computer, then you have, again, your monitor's calibrated, you have profiles for the monitor, and then we're looking at different color spaces, profile, or Adobe Photo, Pro Photo, sRGB. Those are all color spaces, and then it goes from your monitor to your printer. And I have a few papers that I pretty much standardized on, but I'll tell you, just to show you as an example, I have a action that I run for my printer, and it's very specific to a certain paper, and so it's this one. I'll just run this one here. So it is a calibration adjustment. If I turn off these two adjustments, the first one is one that brightens up the image, and it brightens it up by like 25%, and it's using a screen mode. So I used to just adjust a curve to get it a little bit brighter, but the problem is that a curve can be a little bit finicky in the sense that if your curve is too strong or too weak, how much do you move it, and what are the results of that little bit that you moved it? So many years ago, I came across this idea, and somebody else I know had been using this, is using a screen mode and then using percentages of opacity. And that's way more controllable in the sense that I can go, this particular paper I have, it seems to always print really dark. I can bring this up to 50%, or, I can set a percentage. And so I have one of my papers that I use, the sort of the default that I have is that it is about a 25% difference in brightness, it seems like. And some of that could be the way that we are seeing the image on the screen. An interesting thing is Lightroom defaults in their print module for having a pure white screen behind the image. And you will see as soon as you do that, the image looks darker. And, let me go back to the regular one. And so that change in surrounding contrast, brightness, can make a huge difference in the way that you view the image. And so I think the idea in Lightroom for defaulting to this white background is to give you more of a sense. Like if I go even further with this, I'll just put this onto a full screen. And if on the full screen menu, let's see, let me get there. Sorry to make you dizzy. So on the full screen menu, if I go to black, then the image looks brighter. The colors usually look stronger. There's this whole thing about when we're matting our prints, do we use a black matte or a white matte? Some people go to the extreme and use some colored mattes. But you will see if you just cycle through these, so black to dark gray, then to a medium gray, to the light gray, and then to a custom, which is white. It looks considerably darker at this point than it did when I had black around it. So that's one thing that can throw you off when you're looking at an image and getting ready to print it. I don't know that I would recommend always putting a white background around it, but I do think maybe before you go to print, the lighter gray or something like that can give you a better sense of how light or how dark it is. But even using a profile on my printer that was custom made for my printer and for a particular paper, I still have to lighten the image up like 25%. And an interesting thing was, so all these panels you see over here are Tony Kuiper TK panels, and therefore applying luminosity masking to your image. And so I always just used, I'll close out the mask. I always just used this screen adjustment and at 25%. And I have some other luster papers that I almost have to boost this thing all the way up to 100% to get it to look like it does on the screen when this is turned off. And I had this idea that I started thinking about. I go, if I have to boost this screen mode up to 100%, then there will be values on, say, like the apple here or highlights that are near white but not pure white. But by the time I boost it up 100%, they've gone to 255, and my printer is not compensating for that change in it. So one day I was watching a Tony Kuiper video, and I noticed he was talking about loading in your own custom actions into his panel, and he gave an example of using this a printer adjustment that he had. And I paused the video, I noticed on his video that his printer adjustment, he was using a curve with no change in the curve, but using screen and a blend mode of 25%. So it seems like, oh, okay, that seems about right. And I've noticed also that a lot of the labs, if I've sent prints out to labs just as a comparison, that's, for me, that same 25% rule kind of applies there too. But so the solution to the high value problem was, when I saw Tony Kuiper's panel, is this mask. And this mask is a luminosity mask that's designed to block out the brightest whites, but it's in a graduated form. So the whitest whites are dark on the mask and the darkest blacks are transparent on the mask, which then means, the whole principle of masking is white reveals and black conceals. So these black spots, which is basically, it's a negative of the image, right? So if it'll let me do this on the fly. So that is what the opposite of it looks like. This on this mask would protect all the shadows and would allow only that screen mode to affect the brightest values on the image. So those would all start to wash out. And where you usually see the problem is more in the darkest values of the image. So this screen mode uses this highlight mask that's really a protection because it's inverted. So it's saying protect the high values but control the shadows. So now if I jump back out of here and I start increasing this 25%, if I get all the way up to 100%, these high values have not changed, and if they have, just barely, because they are being protected by this highlight mask. So that's kind of something that I do in my own printing.
I love it.
Go ahead.
I just said I love that. I suppose you could get the same result for those that don't have the Kuiper panel with a blend F.
Kind of, but again, it's not repeatable, or it's not manageable in the sense of percentages like this. This is the thing that's so great about it. Yeah.
Yeah, of
Um,
course. Yeah, I get it.
but here's the thing is that, and I've always said this too. Tony Kuiper panel. It's very cheap. It is an amazing tool. It's overwhelming when you, just like when you first get into Photoshop. There's so much you can do with it, but Tony Kuiper's panel doesn't do anything that you couldn't do on your own, and so you could create this mask if you know how to create luminosity masks in Photoshop, and I mean, I'm gonna say it's simple, but it really begins with on the channels. You want to load the RGB channel, not one of the color channels, but the whole RGB channel. So if I select the RGB, click the little button down here, it loads this as a selection. And now that it's a selection, if I add in a curve adjustment, that selection becomes a mask. And there's the mask. It just needs to be inverted. And you'll get exactly the same thing that's on the Tony Kuiper panel. So you can make luminosity masks all day long. It's real simple. But the cool thing about the panel is it does all this for you. So, but this little move is pretty simple to do. So that would be, if you want to do luminosity. And I'll mention for some of the new people here, I do record these meetings, and so when it's over with, I send out a link to everybody, and I upload the meeting videos to my YouTube channel. So if you wanted to review that in a slower pace and you're not able to take the notes, there is a video. So
thank you. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you.
it was like I remember I forget, some actor on one of the movies was trying to impress his intellectual girlfriend, so he decided to read War and Peace, and he got this, the big old book, and after he struggled through it, getting the thing finally done, somebody said, "Well, how long did it take you to read it?" He goes, "Oh my God, it was like a chore." He said, "Well, there is a movie." There is a movie? So, same thing here. It's like, yes, there is a video. So anyhow,
And Cliff Notes.
so
Yeah, videos replace the cliff notes we used in college.
yeah, and so the
Or
other,
YouTube. I'm pretty sure there's a synopsis on YouTube.
right? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So the other layer that's up here is just one that I added on my own, because on my printer I'm using some third-party inks, and I have a older printer that didn't use. It was pre-Vivid Magenta days, and the company that makes the inks have quit making the old magenta, and they said, I have Epson 9800. So they said, with the Epson 9800, just buy our regular set of inks and it will turn your printer into a 9880, thereby giving you the vivid magenta. But the thing that it does is it throws off all the profiles that you already have. So I have a vivid magenta adjustment where it dials back a little bit of the magenta to take care of the profile, not accounting for that new magenta color that I get from them now. So that would not be one that you would necessarily have to have. But yeah, the highlight adjustment. So that being said, Joan, Larry can go off on a tangent real easily, but yeah, I thought it was interesting to talk about that when you were talking about calibrating monitors, and it's you think that because it's all numbers and it's kind of a science of mathematics in a way, that it's just a matter of button pushing, and everybody doesn't think that you're doing art because it's just photography and you push a button and you
Right.
get a print, and what are you doing? So
I was going to ask Joan what gave it away that her monitor was not calibrated. Brenda?
Well, it showed this picture on my monitor was much more saturated, the colors, and it was much darker. I mean, maybe Larry.
and you have a Mac, you said, right?
Pardon me?
You have a Mac computer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a Mac.
So
And so when I printed, I had another picture that I had to print for somebody today.
yeah.
And I had it just right on my monitor. I went down and printed it, and it was not as saturated, and it was much lighter.
Yeah. So there's the thing, I
So-
think most people that I have
This
kind of helped.
Made it look very greenish,
Yeah.
the background.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
very, I don't know if you could make it more saturated. Let's see how it looks. If I can see it like I saw it on my computer.
Yeah. So, well, okay. So more saturation.
I mean, quickly just
That's more saturation. That's less. That's more.
right. And then the background was a little less green, but
Yeah. So
anyway,
weird.
that's a little more what it looked like. It was even a little darker, I would say,
Uh huh.
on my computer.
So I can't.
But
I won't be able to sit
unfortunately,
here and go through every image this
that
way.
looks about right.
So yeah.
That
Okay.
looks
So let's
about
see without the.
what I saw. Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, this still like is taken into account for like we're using an online service, and again, I have no idea how it looks on everybody's screens. Um, the
Right.
other part that I was going to say is that I have just seen that a lot of times when Mac came out with that cinema display, I remember the first time that I saw this, and God, it was beautiful. The contrast, the color saturation. It was just such a beautiful monitor. And then I have a test print that I use for everything. And I print this on my own computer. If I have a lab do a print for me, I send this print to the lab. And I use it to compare to the print that I have. I use it to compare to what's on my monitor. And I am and actually, it's weird because this looks a little off tonight. The I am surprised how far off this can be. So the important part, several important parts here, but when you look at the shadow end of this, I have gotten prints back from labs where this shadow side, so starting at 0 and then 2, 4, 6, I have seen this shadow blocked up all the way into the 20s. And I've seen the highlights blown out all the way into 245. So when you put this up on your screen, if you're not seeing, it's within reason because this 252, 2354, those are very subtle, and we're looking at it fairly small here. If you blow it up and you're looking at it in Photoshop, you want to be able to discern the difference between all of these values. And the shadows are a whole other story. Like what is printable becomes a debate too. That many times by the time you get ready to print, you can really only discern some separation up in this like 10 to 14 range, which is an argument for not necessarily making 0 as your maximum black in an image, because if 8 is going to look like 0, then that means if you put a maximum black in it, then likely that's going to push the shadows up even further. So maximum black is a debatable thing. It has always been a problem, even in darkroom days, trying to hold shadow detail. That's been the toughest thing. So, but yeah, this is a great tool for testing your computer and your monitor and profiles and all of that stuff. So. And this is, you can go online, you can get this, in fact, I have a whole folder full of print test images. The other thing that it shows here is how well they can print a color photograph yet maintain neutral values on a black and white image. So.
Right. Yeah, I should do that. When I had a dark room, I always used the gray card.
Yeah. So Dan asked, are many people in the meeting here familiar with the TK panel or using it? I know Don Lyons does. Anybody else use the luminosity panel or luminosity masking?
Right.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I see it does. You've been to the workshops. Yeah.
Yeah, I use the one from Greg Benz.
Yeah.
Lumenzi, I think.
Yeah,
it's called.
very good. Yeah. I mean, it's all.
Greg's got it together too. That's
Yeah.
a great panel.
I used the one that you made, Larry.
Oh yeah.
The action.
Yeah, I think we did a long time ago. I did a thing. I just want to check I'm past my calibration date, but I want to make sure that it loaded the right one.
I remember that panel you put together, Larry.
What's that?
I remember that
Yeah.
that series of panel that you put together,
Yeah, the right one's
which
there.
was the darks, lights, and mids, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was all about creating from like I said, everything that's on the Tony Kuiper panel can be done manually. It's just way more convenient. All right, so Joan, let's get back to you. I could be sidetracked all night long. So tell us about your image.
So funny.
So tell us about this image, Joan.
Pardon me?
Tell us about this one.
Well, it's like I say, it doesn't match my monitor, but anyway, it's just bowl of fruit that I set up, and it's still life. And I have these two nice ceramic pieces that I like to use. So that's about it.
Okay. All right. Any comments from people in the group?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, hey, Joan, did you drop a background in on this?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
So what is that little rectangular
On the left side, on the
It
picture.
actually looks
the
like
picture? Yes.
it looks like you replaced
What's-
the top somehow.
Oh,
Yeah. What's going on with that?
The hard line.
I have no idea. I
Okay.
didn't notice that.
Yeah,
Well, that's why these critiques are so much.
I know. We all see it.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
it
we
seems
all-
to line up over here on the right side, but on the left it doesn't. And then there's that weird shift
Yeah,
in color.
I think that's what I did, and you can
Also,
see
the
the dark.
area,
I
the area
remember
between
now. I copied this and put the this
Ah,
half.
oops. Let me go back.
This. Oops.
What's that? Oh, okay.
It's another image. And there's also a similar thing in here, I noticed too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
the area between the picture handle and the picture itself seems really dark,
Dark compared
like it
to
doesn't match the rest of the background.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, there's another rectangular piece on the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah.
So
So
then,
you drop that in. It seems a little out of perspective as well. So I'm assuming that was brought in later.
well, I was going to ask you when I first looked. So, like, just on first sight, it's like, okay, I get the whole still life part of this, and then there's a couple of those things that feel like some masking issues, but then these grapes also have sort of something strange going on too. And I don't know again if they were dropped in separately. Were they, or were they all part of the original photograph?
Right.
Like there's
I
this,
can't remember now what I did with that.
or you moved them, maybe that's what it looks
I
like.
moved those
Yeah.
grapes up.
So I'm
Yeah.
looking at that because I can see there's the table.
Masking.
Yeah, that mask on the edge of the
Yeah.
pear didn't quite line up.
Yeah.
So, but interesting.
Hey, Don.
Now let me go back here. If I go back into Photoshop and I look back, let me turn off this hue saturation for now. When I go back, and this was my printer adjustment that I cranked up to 100% just to show you how sometimes I end up having to do that for some papers. And there was something as soon as I did that felt a little more lively about the image. I don't know that I would say I need 100%, but it does feel overall kind of dark, but that could still be a good mood, in terms of lighting on a still life. But I don't know. I kind of liked it a little bit brighter anyhow. And again, not knowing what you saw on yours. All right. Any other comments for Joan?
Yeah, it from the very beginning, the relationship of those grapes in the container in relation to the picture had really bothered me because the picture has a very busy pattern, and then with the grapes in front of it, they seem to kind of conflict with each other. The more I look at it, the more I almost want to turn that container 180 degrees because the orange of the color of the oranges and the apple, I think would go better with that orange in the picture. And then the grapes would be on the opposite side, just composition.
So say that
Right.
again.
Well, I
You're
can
thinking
see
the
that,
picture should be where? Or you're saying 180?
Well, I think the container that has the fruit in it, I almost want to reverse it 180 degrees or take all that fruit and put it on opposite side, like the grape should be on the other side. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
the orange and the apple should be closer to the picture, which would go with the orange flowers in the picture, and then you wouldn't have the grapes in front of it, in front of that really busy pattern.
Right. Well, good comments. Obviously, I have a lot of work to do on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, all right.
this is not
Thank
like
you all.
This next,
John, you know how much I love your work, but yeah, I would start again.
This is not one of my better.
No, that's not the caliber of your work.
all right. Well,
I love
and
you.
somewhat different. And I'm looking at this portrait the same way. This is like way different for anything that I've seen of Jones. And I've seen this image. You and I have talked about it before, and you've changed it quite a bit since I first saw it, I think. Is this crop tighter than the version you showed me a while ago?
This was, I cropped it down because I wanted her face to stand out, her
Yeah.
expression, and then I softened the image. I don't know. I've
All right.
had this for a long time, and I've always kind of liked it, but I don't know.
All right.
Maybe it
Any comments?
doesn't have the appeal. I'm sort of throwing out images that I've been undecided
Yeah,
about.
yeah. I mean, that works great with a group. Any comments from anybody? Everybody's quiet now. They had so much to say about the fruit.
Right. They don't want to upset me too much.
Well,
Oh,
I'm
I was
concerned about the,
payback is hell, John.
I was wondering about this eye here. It's doing some weird things. I don't know if that darker spot is from her hair or.
That was from the solar
I was going to
eclipse
say it starts to
yesterday.
look like an eclipse. But
She should have been wearing her glasses.
the
Her
interesting,
solar glasses.
I'll say the interesting thing about the image is that her expression on her face is just so strange for for what you would say. I mean, it definitely feels candid, but it's such an interesting look on her face. That's the best I can say. Interesting. It's just a strange look on in her eyes and her mouth and the way that the pose was made. Any other comments?
I would pose the question, Joan. What do you want us to look at here? Because for me, when I'm looking on my monitor, I'm kind of seeing her nose, and I'd kind of like maybe to see that a little less prominent. That seems to be like the brightest part of the image. I mean, they're like just right dead center.
Yeah.
So, is it the eyes you want us? And maybe you
Well,
could
and
kind
her
of dial
entire
that
face,
in a little bit.
yeah.
I'm just trying. What is your objective? I mean, what are you thinking here?
Well, I guess I see her in motion with her hair blowing in the breeze, and that expression on her face was just sort of unusual to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also a little weird thing in this corner. But so one of the things that I think, and I always, whether it's a animal, mineral, or vegetable, that. And it's always great, like the question that Don asked. So what is it that you see? What's the important part of it? And I think then it comes down to, again, how we can control how people see this, how they see the image. And actually, I'm going to pull this down a little bit too. So I'm looking at this idea that if we want to light this image in a way, so I'll just grab a brush and I'll start at this 20%. So I really want to like darken, because exactly what you said, my brush is like working slow tonight too. I restarted my computer to try to like take care of the problem, but it's not working. So I'm going to go a little bit stronger, I'm hoping. Yeah, my brush is like traveling slow. Let me go to 50% because this background is going to need to be really dark. All right, so there. I also want to bring this shirt down, probably even this part of her, and even this area in here. And her face is still a little bit bright, and there's this weird shadow on the side of her face too. So like what Don was saying, so if I bring in just a little bit of burning in, and then do another. So, I forgot to mention too, for anybody who is interested, on Saturday, I'm doing a workshop for Polyphoto on curves, and it was their idea for me to do this curves workshop, which anybody who's been to enough meetings know there's like, I basically accomplish almost everything with curves, but Not to say there's not other tools to be used, but so this would be one to darken, and then I would see if I could use a lighten one to see if I could kind of fix this. I'm not really sure if this would be a very good way. There's now, of course, we obviously have access to lots of AI tools that might fix this thing better than I'm doing, but this will just give you at least a little bit of an idea. Yeah, there's a strange little pattern in there, and maybe down here also. But so that little bit of change on her face. So if I turn off both of these layers at one time, that brightness in the background really draws you away, the brightness of the shirt. And so if it's the face you want to be drawn to, I mean, I could even like go further with that darkening. And sometimes a great technique is just to start by duplicating that darken layer one more time, and then maybe going in and customizing that. But I've had some images where I've just gone further and further with it. This becomes a little too spotlighty, but the idea is then these could be just an example of how far do you push the lighting. I think the second layer is too much, the third layer, but at this point then let me pull this one back just a bit, and that spot on her face then needs to be, I think, addressed a little bit better. Again, using, AI techniques. So again, if we there's a couple, I would try first just to see how well it would do it. If I circle this area here, and the trick with a lot of times making your selection and asking AI to fix something is not to try to like draw right on that edge of her face, because it'll either leave a dark spot or not do anything. So we'll use generative fill without a prompt to just see what it does. And this is always, that roll of the dice is like, okay, will it see what we're doing? Generally, it might reshape the edge of her face a little bit. You're always after, something that doesn't change it too much, but one that might at least blend these tones in a little better. So that is better.
Wow.
That's not bad. A weird little thing here, but again, there's always, you can keep regenerating, but you could spend all day long trying to dodge that or retouch that or clone that, where making this, generative selection sometimes will take care of the problem. And I'll just show you, there's one other thing there's pretty believable. There's one little spot here I'd want to fix, but sometimes what I'll do is take this now and sort of just fade it back a little bit.
Oh.
And the only thing is that it did reshape her face right here on the edge, so I'd have to fix that too. But anyhow, so that way it kind of brings back a little bit of the original piece. And back to this now. I would need my dodging layer on her face now, but anyhow.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
Still
definitely better.
Anyhow,
The darker
those are tricks. Any other comments for Joan on this one?
One thing that I would be tempted to do, Larry, is since the eyes are always the key in portraits, that's your eyes should go to their eyes. That's really the limiting factor. Everything is a little bit soft in the image. What I would be tempted to do is take a radial brush and just slightly lighten those catch lights so they pop a little bit more, just very slightly. They're beautifully large. They really look good. And then select those eyes and use one of the sharpening tools that you have in your software to sharpen up the eyes a little more, and you can give the illusion that the whole thing's sharper because they're going to look right at the eyes and see detail.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And the Topaz Sharpen AI is an amazing tool. It can take an image that is a little bit soft like that and really save it. And you can push, like if you exaggerate the sharpening for the softest areas, and then, like you're saying, mask in those areas so they are the strongest part of the sharpening effect. It could be effective on especially on a portrait. And you're right about the eyes.
I agree with that, and I think you mentioned that she had softened the image, so maybe just mask that out as to the eyes.
Did you say that, Joan, that you softened the image a little bit?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, so wherever you softened it, if you just masked back the eyes so they were a little bit sharper, because like Robert said, you are drawn always to look at those eyes.
Right.
Yeah, that's the compelling thing for me. I love her expression, but Robert hit absolutely on the nail on the head.
Yeah.
We want to see those eyes just kind of staring right back at us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then this is a typical Joan image, or I think more typical, I'll say. So,
Yeah. On my computer, it was the background was a little less green
This-
and a little more pronounced. But
it's a green gray
Anyway.
here. If you compare, so on your computer, you're looking at it right now. What color is the not your image background, but the background on my screen?
well, when I'm seeing your computer, it's sort of a beige, dirty beige color.
But what about this gray background on the screen? Not yours, but it's actually the computer screen gray background. What color does it look on yours? Does this background look
Better
new?
than mine.
No, the square is yours. Outside of the
Right.
square is my screen.
Right.
So does that gray have a color cast on yours?
Yeah, it does have an olive color cast.
Olive. Okay. All right. So tell us about this
But
piece.
it's mostly gray,
Yeah.
I'd say like three-card gray practically.
Mhm.
Anyway, these are squash blossoms, and this is another
Uh-huh.
old image that
Huh.
I've been tempted to delete so many times. I thought, oh, like it, but anyway,
And what did you do to create the white squiggle line around the edge?
that was a pie pan.
So it
a
is
fluted,
real. Oh,
yeah,
very,
tin pie pan.
very cool. That works really well.
Yeah. Wow.
And I love the idea of the pie pan shape, the circle, and then in a square. That's just really nice.
Very cool.
Any comments from anybody else?
So pretty.
Did you paint the highlights, Joan? Did you paint on those or something? Look like they've been enhanced. The highlights have been drawn up
Actually,
or drawn
all of
out or however.
Yeah, I did use painter,
Yeah.
Corel painter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. It's kind of cool. The contrast that it builds is really neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Brush
interesting
strokes
when you
on.
do some of these effects, they aren't, I mean, it still looks painterly, but I've seen before where people will use like, textured overlays and things, and it's so less obvious at this size, and you zoom in on it, you go, oh yeah, no, there's a texture on top of that. But yeah, you zoom in, you really see the brush strokes that she's used.
Right.
Very cool. I think that, again, and are these multiple images that you've put in there, or are they actually
Right.
all in the pie?
Oh, that was shot right like
Oh, it was.
that.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So the bottom of the pan is so dark. What did you do to get it that dark?
Pardon me?
How did you get the bottom of the pan to be so dark? It seems like it would be silver.
I just darkened
You
it.
did. Wow. Good job.
Right.
I love it. And it's in that shape around the edge. It's almost, it feels like, oh, you must have drawn that, or it's really cool how that became such a graphic element to this. And again, the square and the circle and all that add to that graphic
Yeah.
feel. All right, very cool, John. Ann Collins.
Okay, well, thank you all.
All right.
Awesome, Jane. Thank you. I loved
Let me
it.
go here. Ann Collins.
Miss Collins.
That's my name.
Tell us about this. This is
Hey,
more
Ann.
your foggy, snowy trip. It looks like. Looks great.
Yes, at the Grand Tetons in Wyoming this last winter. So this is the cottonwood tree, and I'm just looking for suggestions. It's not quite where I want it to be, but I don't know what to do.
All right. All right. Comments then, you landscape people.
I feel like the trees should be a little more silhouetted and a little more contrasty against the background. And also that white horizontal line just really bothers me.
Yeah. So is that a street
Yes.
road? Yeah.
I know, but it can be toned down. It can be made the same color as the rest of it. I see the gray.
I tried to make it the same color, and it worked out pretty good.
Content aware Phil. There
so,
we go.
So actually, but I will show you. I go. This is again, the difference between content. How did Photoshop get closed?
You said a generative fill or
Yeah,
content
it's a
aware?
generative fill. And
Okay.
but I
It
tried
worked well.
content aware first. And so, because I know I mean, a lot of people I talk to still are not on board with this whole generative stuff. It's like, I don't know if I like that. So, yeah, so this is the generative fill. Come on, network error.
Yeah.
It worked well because all that ground cover looks really uniform when you did that.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
that's generative fill.
It is.
So if I compare
stupid.
that to here's what content aware fill looked like, and if you zoom in on
Oh
that,
yeah, smudged,
Yeah.
smudger.
not only smudge,
Yeah.
but there's a bunch of repeat stuff that happens, and
Oh yeah.
so I mean that's just
I did
That's-
try to fill it in, and it was really difficult because the foreground bushes are soft focus, and the bushes where the street is would be sharp, because the rest of it behind are sharp.
mhm.
Tough.
Behind the sharp. Well, I think you did a great. I love the centered comp with, I mean, and the juxtaposition of the background and the foreground. I think the getting rid of that road is a great call. It's terrific as it is now.
So
So let's do the
Osia's comment about darkening those trees. I don't, it becomes kind of a hard thing to actually, target just those trees and trying to mask just those trees, and would not be easy. But you could end up with more contrast overall, and again using a blend mode of luminosity, so there's not a lot of color change. And you could paint out some of the contrast in the foreground and the background, I guess, but it's really not going to be accurate. So the question is, could you generate some kind of a mask that would, separate it from the background? And it's possible, I guess. I mean, the thing to look at would be, again, I'm not going to harp on the Tony Kuiper panel, but to be able to figure out, the separation here. So the Kuiper panel, it's on the right side are the lights and the left side are the darks. And so either way, if you could get it to separate, I mean, right there kind of gives me a pretty good
That's
separation
pretty
of the
good,
tree, right? The other thing you always want to do when you're looking through these, because he gives you this option up here, RGB, so that's all three channels. This is what the red channel would look like. This is what the green channel would look like. It gets a little darker behind it. The blue channel gets a little bit darker. The cyan channel
that's really good right
is about
there.
the same. Magenta, brighter, yellow, brighter. So I would say the blue channel is going to give me the best separation back there. And then the next thing is doing some kind of adjustment to maybe get a little bit more separation by adjusting levels or curves. And so if I want to bring out more brightness in the tree or more clarity in the mask there, and then seeing if I can use some of the mid tone there, that's not bad. And then this kind of stuff would be easy to paint out, and also in the foreground would be easy to paint out. And you could do it here, or you could do it in Photoshop, or back when you're on the layer. So I'll just say let's make a curve adjustment out of that. And so with that mask on this curve, and I'm going to go ahead and, I could leave that on. I'll just put this above it. I didn't make the mask with it there, but I'm going to paint it out anyhow. So at this point, the goal here, I got to be on the right layer. Yeah, here we are on the mask. All right, so the curve. If I wanted to try to darken the trees, and I doubt that we would ever get it to go to a silhouette. There's just too many other tones in there.
Yeah.
But I do kind of like a little more. And the problem is this kind of lighting is very flat. And so, to get too much contrast starts to get a little goofy. So there's two ways you can cure the mask problem. One is I could just paint directly on the mask here, which I'm not a big fan of, because if I want to get back here, then I got to start all over again. So there's that technique that Sean Bagshaw calls masking the mask. And in the Tony Kuiper panel, there's a little thing here where what I could do is I put that curve into a group, and on that group we add another mask. And now I can paint out these areas with black at 100%. And the only thing is the contrast would probably still be here in the foreground, so I'd have to be careful about how much this I want to really paint out. And then the other areas that were up in here, these really aren't getting much change at all. But so that idea then is the initial mask is the trees in the foreground. The secondary mask is blocking out that information. So the only thing that's really being shown through is what's in the white here. So that's that masking the mask idea. And if you wanted to, I mean, this is what I love doing. This is like making the black mask here and then dropping the density of the mask. So you bring back a little bit of the contrast back into the foreground. So if I drop the mask all the way down to 0, it'd be like not having the mask at all. And then slowly raising the density of the mask gives you just a little more control over that. And so if I actually look at the mask, I'm at 51%. So that would be like painting with 50%, but a little bit more difficult to do if you have to do more than one brush stroke. So this kind of is a solution for that. And if I turn that...
You know, a lot of this... I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of this, particularly with contrast, I see so many images where trees or clouds or parts of an image become overly contrasty. I mean, I think we're all looking for that Goldilocks amount of contrast. I personally love those soft, contrasty, more photorealistic uses of contrast. And I think sometimes we go a little too far. That's all. I kind of like Dan's soft approach to the initial contrast, and I liked what we did with that road.
Mm-hmm. Anybody
Otherwise, it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I have a question on that generative fill that you used. Did a great job, but does it match the same density, pixel density, and everything that the original
no
image?
It doesn't match the resolution. That's the problem with it right now. So
if you printed with it, you'd have a problem.
It depends on what size you printed it, obviously, and this is a JPEG, but you will, and it's hard to tell here because the foreground is soft anyhow, so you would probably get away with it in this situation. The solution to this problem is, or similar problems to it. So and there's no clarity on this formula quite yet, and that's that Firefly, which is supposed to be the AI engine that's running inside Photoshop. Well, Firefly just did an update, and it started out at the resolution was 1024 pixels, but now it's already doubled. It's 2048, but nobody has said whether or not Photoshop has geared up to doubling the pixels in here yet either. So the solution to that then is to do this in sections. And what I've done is on my marquee tool up here in the toolbar, the menu options, you can create what's called a fixed size or a custom size. So I made it 1024 by 1024. And because this is a JPEG, it's going to be much smaller resolution. But on your larger image, if I bring the tool, into Photoshop and I just click here, that tells me what 1024 looks like. Now let me zoom back out here. So 1024 is this big section right here. So it's about half the image, right? So technically, I could probably get away with doing it in 2 pieces here. On a much larger resolution, I might have to do it in 5 pieces across here. So you'd have to do it like 5 times. And the same thing with, if you're going to use say the crop tool to generative expand the frame, you kind of have to do the same thing. But it always depends on the content. Like this background would probably generate just fine because there's no really detail in it. But the grass area where there's a lot of strong detail, you'd have to do it in sections also that were no bigger than 1024.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is actually pretty high resolution because it's 3 vertical frames stitched
That's Ann. That's Ann doing them stitchings. So yeah, so that's this high resolution would really demand that you'd have to do it in sections. Now there's another school of thought, and I don't know, not a lot of people are in favor of it, but it does work, and that is to like if you're going to do this big section here and you want to do it all in one. One is to reduce the resolution of your image. So dropping the image back down to 1024, do the generative fill, and then using like the topaz gigapixels to bring it back up to size again, and then that way everything comes back up together and you have control over the way that the generative fill looks.
That's a great idea.
So
Hey, Ann, did you use a pano head for this, or did you just use the swivel on your tripod?
I have a ball head and a swivel, so it's just your typical tripod, but I do a lot of panoramas.
Yeah, cool.
yeah, really well done. So nobody mentioned anything about a crop, which always happens to always be the most popular suggestion when we look at things. So I don't know. I'm only saying that out loud just because.
Excuse me. Dan Elmore is here.
Yeah.
Not Vern Elmore.
No, yeah, you missed. I already raised my eyebrow. I was like, Dan Elmore.
Well,
Good Elmore, Dan Elmore.
yeah.
I mean,
the newlywed Vern Elmore, by the way.
yeah. So
Yeah,
so I don't know.
I like it better vertical.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't.
not-
Well, because somebody had mentioned the tree.
square.
Does the crop make the tree more important, or is it too crammed, too crowded?
Right.
I don't know.
I would blur those trees there. I think the blue
In the
trees,
background.
on the left side.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that blueness, which is natural, but it's a little bothersome to my eye. I might use that new point color system that Adobe's come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it were more
Select the blue and then
lighter and more the color of the right side.
Point color works beautifully. I am falling in love with that tool.
Well, so I'm not going to poo-poo it. The only problem is that you would need to do it up front. If you're going to do it, you can go in there from here. The problem with using Camera Raw as a filter, and I would do it like on this layer here, so I'd end up making a smart object and running Camera Raw there. The problem is then it never sees anything that you've done above it, and so you're kind of flying a little bit blind when you're making adjustments using that particular adjustment. Now the reality is, and not to blow it out of the water, but that point adjustment is really not any different than hue saturation inside of Photoshop, and the way that it would work here is using the targeted hand. And I always start with this anyhow because I'm never sure, is this going to show up as a blue or a cyan, right? So I'll click on that color there, and sure enough, it's a cyan, not a blue. Now all that does is get you on the right target here. It doesn't really select that color. It pinpoints it or broadly points it. But now if you grab this first dropper here, this is where that point color thing comes in. I grab that dropper there, and if you watch the bars, they're split here because they're on the end of the color spectrum here. But if I click on a specific color now, the bars shift. So now I'm specifically targeting the blues that are in between these two values, these two uprights right here. And so now when I make an adjustment here, if I were going to just desaturate, it's going to target just those blues. And I would agree, as soon as I pull that down, it takes a lot of focus off of that background, right? So
It just pull your eye away from the tree.
Right.
Exactly.
yeah. I also
Did you repeat what you said now? In RAW, you said the point color will not show up as you continue layers. It's not going to show up on the layers.
No, what will happen is, let's say if I have these other adjustments going on in here, these other adjustment layers, if I come down here and I'll just do this, I always make it a smart object if I'm going to work with a filter. Then I would go to filter, Camera Raw, and when I come into Camera Raw, I will not be able to see the generative fill either, but I'm not seeing the trees adjusted. And if I made any other adjustments, I wouldn't be seeing them either. So I'd be going,
That's
okay,
right.
I can come in here and I can do that point color and color mixer. I can do the point color thing in here and deal with it, but I'm not seeing it in relationship to any other curve adjustments or things that I've done. So it can be a drawback, but it's still worth doing. I use it a lot.
Would you be able to stamp that into a stamped layer, then make that a smart object, and then do the camera raw filter on that?
Yes, you
stamped layer?
can, and I mean that is a workaround for that for sure. One of the things that, and I'm in favor of doing it when I'm doing generative fill, even if I have to do it in several passes or whatever. I'm in favor usually of make this duplicate layer here, use this for retouching, and if the generative fill stuff I'm happy with it, I would go ahead and merge it down anyhow, because it just keeps all of the retouching stuff into one layer. The one problem is that as soon as you stamp all of this stuff together, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having adjustment layers, in that, you know, now if I decide that I want to make the tree lighter or darker, then I kind of have to back out of there again. And so I was in favor of trying to keep that non-destructive workflow, or trying not to make, you know, too many permanent decisions. I mean, even doing that merge down was hard for me to get used to, because I like to keep things together. But what happens with those generative fill layers is, if they're on the edge of something and you want to retouch, it's hard to tell, am I retouching the generative fill layer, or do I retouch my other, you know, retouch layer instead? So as you start merging those things in, it all just becomes part of the image, and then it makes it easier to retouch and do color balancing. And then also, as you're generating masks, I mean, that becomes another thing too with luminosity masking. If you generated this mask before you did the fill, then it wouldn't be in here. So those are things that you have to do over too. So there's just some things in a workflow that you might have to do over again. So I'm always trying to like get away from as much as I can. But that is a workaround, yeah, to go ahead and stamp things together, then go into camera raw. I think I would be more in favor of flying blind and just trying to get that as close as I can, and then come back to Photoshop and go and look how it looks now with those adjustment layers, and go, okay, I think I need to lighten it up a little bit more, go back in and play with that. I mean, so that was one other thing I was looking at on this hue saturation adjustment we did. If I go back to the cyan, so there's my adjustment. The other thing too, since we've already targeted a specific color, then usually I'll use a curve, but I'm not a real big fan of using this to do a lot of lightening and darkening. But if I wanted to try to lighten up those trees a little bit, I would probably really be in favor. And I kind of like, was it Joan that said, maybe taking some contrast out of those so that they kind of look like these over here on the right hand side. So having that balance in the background, I think, would put more focus back on the trees again. So that might be, again, another way, rather than adjusting that there, would be to create a curve and a mask and try to brush this stuff in. It's a little difficult because you got a lot of stuff going on, but I think if you hit mostly these areas out here, you would be able to control it fairly well. So let's see, we have a curve here. What is it doing? All right, so let's reset that. And so to flatten out those trees, again, I'm just looking at the that area. Let me turn it on, that'll help. So I'm just looking at that area as I do this. Boy, it's got to go a long way to flattening out those shadows. And then that's the trick too, is trying to then, you know, just flatten the shadows but not everything else, and then masking it in. You could try to make a selection, again, using luminosity masking. Another thing about luminosity masking too, is, just to be fair about it, is that a lot of it is functional here inside the color range command also. So I can select by a color range or a value. So I could say I want to try to target these trees. They happen to be pretty isolated over there. So let me grab this darkest tree. So I usually come in, grab the color, get the value. And if you try to adjust this fuzziness slider here, it's a little hard to see on this thumbnail. So on the selection preview, once I've made the selection and got it close to where I want, I then switch this to grayscale, and then the entire image becomes, it's not supposed to do that, the entire image becomes a thumbnail where I can see that happening. So why is mine not functioning right? Sometimes when I'm online, things that goofy. It's not going to do it. Anyhow, this thumbnail would normally show up on the screen there, and then as I adjust this fuzziness slider, I'll be able to see when it really targets those trees real well. So then I would say, okay.
Yeah, the size, right?
What's that?
Sometimes that won't show because it's like the tiny little corner. It's not showing the whole picture.
No, I had the whole.
You're too zoomed in, maybe.
No, I wasn't zoomed in at all. It's right here. I had the whole thing open. I mean, we're looking at the entire.
No,
image.
I mean in the
What about
selection
just-
window.
Excuse me.
All right, so let me do that then. If I come, I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off for now. All right, so if I go into select color range, let me get back to none. I want to target the trees. They're targeted. I'm looking at the entire image right here, right now. I'm not zoomed in at all. I go to grayscale.
Yeah, that's the real image. Okay.
So I should get, this should be I should see the mask here, and I'm not.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not doing it.
Is that because your layer's not active? I
No,
don't see your-
it's not even on this layer.
No.
It's
Oh.
probably a graphic card
Check
issue.
with-
Let me try if I go to the image. Maybe that'll make a difference. Select color range.
Time for a new
Oh, it
computer.
is. So there it is. I didn't have the image layer selected. It is. It's way past
Oh.
time for a new. So that's it.
Yeah.
That was the solution, David. I had to be on this layer here. So now when I go to make the adjustment with grayscale on and I do the fuzziness slider, I'm seeing the entire image here, and I'm not trying to do it based on this tiny thumbnail. So that gives me a good selection of the trees. I'm just gonna say okay. There's my selection. I can come back up here to my curve. I'll just go ahead and delete this layer mask and then add a mask in while I have the selection. So there it is there. And again, I'm going to end up having to do that the mask thing or paint some stuff out. But so there's the adjustment. And that works so much better because then it doesn't blow out all the whites, right? Because they're being masked. And so if I put that into a group with a black mask and a brush that is white, and then start revealing the effect here.
Well,
pretty good. So,
Very good.
and sometimes once you get the mask made, you can still go back and then revisit the curve and maybe see I have more control over it at this point because I'm seeing it through the mask. So that's kind of the idea. And I could still come back here. Those actually are pretty good. Another technique for adjusting contrast on a mask. So I could bring up levels at this point and still adjust the mask. Typically, you'd want to do this while you're looking at the image to see, what it's doing to the overall image. But so that's one way you can do it. I'll just say cancel. The other way is there's more than one, several ways. So on the mask again, I could take the burn and dodge tool. So in this case, I want to dodge the whites, and so I'll use the dodge tool and set it to highlights. And so now when I dodge in here, it's only going to lighten up those tones that are 50% or lighter, or multiple passes will allow those trees to get lighter. And they'll do nothing to the blacks, right? So then the other way around that is, rather than using the burn and dodge tool, you can use a brush and take the brush up here and set the mode to overlay, and then paint with white, and sometimes at a lower opacity. So as I start painting in overlay mode, it'll also lighten up only those whites, right? So it won't lighten up those blacks. So that's a great tool for going in and bringing out all of those values. Again, I would probably want to do it while I'm looking at the image to see what the effect is. But those are three ways that you can adjust the contrast of the mask after the fact. I do like that idea of making those lighter. So
Yeah, that makes the tree jump out more, huh? More
Yeah.
contrast. That's great.
And then this is our let's see, here it is, our contrast on the tree. Don had mentioned he liked it a little softer. I don't know. I like it either way.
A little bit softer.
The pregnant question is, what does Ann think?
Yeah. It's just her
I always
image.
decide later. I just look at it and then
It's
I
only her
decide
photograph.
Larry, the trees are almost in the center, and I'm just wondering if it'd be more interesting to crop from the left side almost over to the tree.
Really, after I did all that work, now you want to crop it?
I'd say a speck more.
A little more? I don't know if I want to cram.
A little
I
more.
don't know if I want to cram the edge there, but I don't know. This is sometimes it's a hard thing to get past because we're so drilled in our heads, never to put anything in the middle of a frame. But sometimes it works. I don't know.
I know.
I like this way better.
You like it cropped better.
Yeah, and to the left.
So
Over a little more. Larry.
over a little more. Okay. I don't know if you can see. There's a
About
there's a
there.
branch right here. So,
Well, maybe not.
and
Oh
that's
my
another
God.
thing too that'll screw you up every time is these using the crop tool with the grid turned on in the thirds, because I've watched people that are like, okay, so that line has to line up on the tree. So right there is the good crop. It's there for a suggestion, and yeah, it can help, but be careful that you don't go. My main subject has to end up right there. Technically, I would say the middle of those two trees should be on the third, and now it's too tight of a crop. But
Yeah.
all right, we're gonna say don't for now.
Straighten
Okay.
and a vignette.
Thank you. I think we beat this one
Yes.
to the end.
To a
Would you put
point.
a vignette on that, Larry?
Say that again.
Would you put a vignette on that one? I think that would help.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
It needs to be
Okay.
straightened too. It's crooked. It's driving me crazy.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
So, there's Kurt Lightfoot. Welcome, Kurt. So,
Can you start over? I came in late.
of course,
Hey Kurt, check out YouTube.
Of course.
Look on YouTube.
of course, we can. So, if anybody's
Thank you.
YouTube.
if anybody's tried to use the elliptical marquee tool and has been totally frustrated by it, I'll share with you the secret to this tool, because it frustrated the shit out of me for years. So the problem usually is trying to
Thank
draw the shape that you want and having it end up exactly where you want it to go. And so if you don't let go of the mouse, you can use the space bar to move this around at any time. So that's the key to getting this thing to work properly, is
Yeah.
get this thing drawn right, use the space bar to kind of like get it centered where you want it. The reality too is you could transform it afterwards too, but I'm going to say, let's say right about there.
Come on over, everybody.
And I'm going to go ahead and add another curve, one more curve, because we don't have enough. I'm going to take it out of the group. That's another weird thing. Does anybody ever notice? Let me go backwards. If you have the group open, it will always end up adding it to the group. But if you close the group and you add the curve,
Yeah.
it'll put it up on top. So it's just, it drives me crazy, because I always have a lot of times the group open so I can see what I'm doing, and then it's like, crap, didn't want that in there. All right, so then let's go ahead and darken it. And again, with an image like this, I probably would most images anyhow, I tend to start adding my vignette from the top of the curve layer. Now, yes, this is backwards, so let's invert
Can I
it.
invert it?
Yeah.
Some of us still refer to this as a vignette.
Vignette, yeah. And so
I think that's
Um,
the
You got the
Italian
thought of
version.
this
I'm telling you, one day that guy is going to end up in a class and you won't know that it's him, and I'm going to get my ass kicked. All right, so doing this feathering is at that point where, okay, so how obvious or less obvious do you want it to be, right? So the less feathering you have, the more obvious it is. And then also, once you've done the feathering, you can still go back in and adjust the curve if you want to do a little bit more. I mean, that's more for the foreground. I mean, you can see if you do that, you're going to be hard pressed to get much out of the top part of this. That's why I started the pull down early, or from the very top. A little more than I want.
Nick filters is so much better.
Oh,
The dark and light and center and Nick.
yeah.
I love
Okay,
it.
so I'm going to show you how to shortcut Nick. So here's the darken the edges. Control J.
And did you see what you started here?
Invert.
Oh my gosh, dude, we're never going to get to everybody else's
Oh,
image.
how do you know how many we have?
That's true.
All right, there's darken and lighten
We
and
could be here
center.
like till midnight.
So that's the darken and lighten center. Let's see. Actually, we need. I didn't push this up at all. Doesn't need much because that center is going to get too bright. Anyhow, yeah, darken and lighten center is pretty easy to do in Photoshop, but it's a great tool inside Color Effects. So all it is taking this, because it's an exact reverse. So you use the same mask twice. Use one for the outside, one for the inside, two different curves, one to darken, one to lighten, and you end up with the the ever popular darken and lighten center. I think it's a great tool, and I think most digital images really do need some level of that darkening the outside and lightening the center. But all right, that horse.
Thank you.
That horse. That's the one we just did. So wait a minute. Okay, so yeah, I saved. Okay. All right. So then down here you've got.
I thought we were going to skip the rest of Van Collins.
I just knew the rest of them were so perfect we weren't going to mess with it, have to mess with it.
Wow.
So I'm gonna pull these two up together so we can kind of see. I mean, they're both the same image, but you've cropped them differently. So go ahead and tell us.
Yes. So again, same place, Tetons, and I'm just wondering if this crop works for you, more panoramic style.
I say absolutely. I mean,
I love it.
I think the crop is really good. It really exaggerates that sweep that's going through the whole middle too, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Now
And I'm open to other suggestions too, of course.
sorry we don't have.
We have
sorry we don't have time. I don't know. I mean, the only thing that I thought, again, there's not a lot of color in the image, but would it work just as well, as a black and white image? And you kind of have that version on some of the other ones, but I mean, there is a lot of blue in here, so you could get a little more contrast and tonality out of it by darkening the blues. But I don't know. I think it works just as well as a color image too.
Yeah, I am planning to make a black and white image out of it.
So I'll throw this out.
Do you think that there's too much texture in the foreground that I should try to fade it out maybe with less contrast?
I don't know. Anybody have a opinion about that? The texture that appears in the foreground.
Is that a road again, that line across?
No, it's just like in Ansel Adams's picture of the overlook at Snake River. You see that bank that comes up behind, and that's it.
Okay.
So in order to,
I like the texture.
I mean, you could use a minus clarity on this part of it. I mean, rather than trying to flatten out those rocks. So again, if you did oops.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Does the contrast and the texture in the image bother anybody, or would say, yeah, let's get rid of it?
Well, now that somebody's mentioned it, I see it, but I didn't see it before.
Now that you mention it.
Okay. I'll play with it.
Oops. I keep forgetting they divided these all up recently. So a minus clarity. Yeah, they still don't even really soften up. So let's go with, let's try the minus texture a little bit. Let's try both of them a little bit. Let's try DAs. There, perfect. They're gone now. Yeah, I think in order to do those, you'd have to do the same thing we did a minute ago with the selection of those shadow values, put a curve on them and flatten them out that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. And then we have two versions of this one too.
Yeah, this first version is the raw version.
Oh, it is.
It was very
okay. And that's your process version. From that.
Not my process.
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, I have some images of some like foggy trees that I've never really been able to get what I wanted. And I'm inspired by yours. I'm echoing on Kurt. I'm going to have to mute Kurt. So I saw this. I thought, oh, maybe that's the thing is just to go with this like totally, no blacks and just sort of almost that white on white look. I like the way it looks. I love it. And I think what makes it, for me, what works really well is the frost on these foreground branches because they really stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Let's see back here again. Yeah, I like it. It's an unusual image.
It's a beautiful moon.
Yeah. Say it again.
It's a beautiful mood, I
Yeah.
said just that.
Yeah.
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 Very ethereal.
Yeah. Which one of these two you want me to show first? I'll show them together because
That one. Okay. So this is just a technical question. So the first one there is the raw image, and then the second one
this is the raw. So that's
dehaze
the way it came out originally. Wow. So yeah.
Yeah. And then dehaze is that's the really high dehaze, just to show you, not because I would do it
Right.
this way, but because I'm getting this red or magenta-ish blue on the right side and a little on the left side.
Yeah.
And it's very weird. It seems to be only showing up in the whitish, cloudy, foggy images. And I was wondering if anyone has experience with that.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's a problem with Canon cameras.
So Ann sent me this picture and asked me that question. I'm like, I've never seen this problem before. I don't know. I was asking her about, so where was the sun positioned? Is it a possible that there's some flare that's not, it's so flat here, it doesn't feel like there's any really direct light anyhow.
Right.
But,
when I did look at the sunny images that I have, it didn't show up.
I had no answer for this, so I would love to know if anybody else has seen this or thought about what could cause that.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I did email Canon's, professional services, because I'm a gold member, and they have not responded.
Well, that's nice. Maybe you need to be a platinum member. Yeah, no
So I'll go on there.
no answer.
No answer?
No answer.
Wow.
Let me see what I'm curious. I mean, this is a JPEG of the raw file, but I was curious if I added in, a hue saturation layer and just cranked it, it's still there. Look at even in the JPEG, this magenta color is stronger than the up in the area where it's blue. I mean, it's really neutral up
That's
there, but
amazing.
for some reason,
Yeah.
those pixels have shifted to that magenta tone.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of a nuisance to fix in all my foggy, cloudy
Oh,
images.
I'm telling you, when you sent it, I thought, well, could it be fixed? And it's like I messed with it for a while and didn't see any way to do it. Well, actually, the best way to do it is to turn it into a black and white photograph. So that's always what I tell everyone. They have like some weird mixed lighting situation. They're trying to get the colors balanced, and it's like I don't know what I can do. And I go, well, when it's that bad, sometimes turn it to a black and white. That's the only solution.
I've done that.
Yep.
Now, I did figure out 2 ways to fix it. One in Lightroom and one in Photoshop. In Photoshop, I changed the hue and hue saturation and also take down the saturation. And then in Lightroom, I use a brush and do something similar. I forget what.
The problem I had when I tried to shift it is then there are these areas in here that, are actually blue sky showing through.
Yeah.
And then they just either go, gray or whatever. They don't shift to the right tone. And it's weird. This has sort of that magenta cast. This in here has a weird bit of cyan peeking through this area here. Little areas it kind of goes a little greenish, gets a little neutral, and then back to the magenta purple again. Weird. Yeah. Bizarre.
I mean,
All right, let's crop it out and move on, for crying out loud.
Get an icon.
Get a Nikon. Wow.
That's another answer.
All right. Miss
Thank
Linda
you,
Berman.
Ken, for taking up the entire night.
Linda has been out chasing wild horses.
Yes, I have.
Wow. So tell us about your experience and about the photographs.
Well, I've had a dickens of a time working with these because the light is so horrible. It was very contrasty, and there's a lot of junk in the background, and I did a lot of cleanup with generative fill. A lot of cleanup. If you look at the bottom image, you'll see the difference.
I was going to open this up.
I
And
feel
show
like
the
I'm
layers.
picking up trash out of these pictures.
Feel like you're doing what?
picking up trash.
Yeah.
These pictures.
So that's the original background layer before all your retouching.
Yeah.
So at least we don't have to add a vignette. You've done that for us.
Yeah, there you go.
I think the retouching is outstanding.
Good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, solid.
And
Now I'm seeing something now I'm seeing on the screen at the top, and I think there was probably some fill up there, and there's a line that kind of bothers
across
me.
that edge there.
Up. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yes.
That
Oh,
just looks
yeah.
sad.
And I think I would go ahead and do this one through the center also. No,
Oh, you mean the pathway?
Yeah.
Right, at his knee, above his knee? Okay.
Yeah. But I'm going to point out in this case too, so because Linda comes to the Monday morning thing, so we've all been talking about the fair rules and the whole AI processing, what you can and can't do. The great thing here is, so she's left all of her generative fill layers there. And so I love, I can go back up and look at them and I go, oh, you used the tool and you did use a prompt. So she put grass and small yellow flowers. So this is the thing that they're saying that you can't do, is you cannot use that prompt. But I mean, again, it's like it makes beautiful use of your image. And also if I look, I thought there was some yellow flower. Well, there barely. I thought there was some yellow flowers.
Actually, in some of
initially.
Some of the areas there were. Yeah.
I mean,
So
it feels
that was-
totally natural. And the other thing too about the process too is that's so amazing, is that it picks up on your depth of field, and automatically realizes where it's soft and the things that it's going to add is also soft, and so and the lighting is usually pretty dead on. It's pretty amazing, and to think that I have this technology that can do this, but my camera club, my fair, my whoever is going to say that you're not allowed to do that. And my argument has been that I don't think these kinds of rules support creativity at all. Most of us have reached a level of photography of doing fine art. This is not a documentary image. In fine art, it's kind of like all is fair in love and war in fine art. So that's one more level of I think you should be. It's your image. Do what you want to do to it. If you want to add some flowers.
Yesterday, Larry, I lost the generative fill. My Photoshop program just went haywire. I had to call India and have them take a look into my computer and see what was wrong. They wound up uninstalling and installing the program again. But I realized how dependent I've become on generative skills. It's become a junkie. It's scary,
So Fred's not here tonight.
The next thing, I think they're going to start charging us for it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not. But Fred Gutentag's not here tonight. But Fred refused to go over to the subscription-based Photoshop program, so he is still running CS6, and
that's amazing.
He does a beautiful job. I mean, he's still very creative, right? But I just cannot imagine being stuck back on CS6 at this point in my life. And like you say, you become so dependent on some of these tools to do things that you couldn't do otherwise.
It's like crack.
It is. It is.
Is it, Don?
You get hooked. I only on rumor.
I see.
This one's free.
And so also you did a great job, I think, too, in blurring the background. So what technique did you use to blur the background?
I was using both raw, the raw fill, blur, and I also used the neural filters. I was using them, on different ones. One time I'd use one, and one time I'd use the other.
Very cool.
I just sort of picked up on that. That's great, Linda.
Yeah,
that worked really well.
Because
the flowers I'm sorry. I was just going to say I like the flowers, the way they now frame the image.
Yeah. Thank you. I found that the area is so busy with all this brush that the horses kind of get lost in it. So you have to do something to pull them out and away from all that busyness.
Yeah. Well, so
maybe you could crop a little from the top. Do you think that might?
Jona's become our crop queen.
I could, but I think on the previous images that I've submitted for discussion, I've cropped too much off the top, if you recall, Larry. So I think maybe I've gone the other way and given it a little too much headroom. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, there's an interesting, like when you have a subject there, a car, a house, a horse, or whatever. There's a thing about, if you start to remove too much of the top, then there's this, not that it gets tight on them, but does that too. But then it sort of changes this balance of where they're standing or how they're grounded in that way that when there's a little more headroom to it, then they feel a little more grounded down here, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
All right. Let's take.
Good job.
Maybe just crop a small amount. I would do.
All right, and I'm going to open this one too, just so we can see the difference.
Brighten up the area around his mouth, because I didn't even notice it until Larry zoomed in. And oh my God, look at that emotion and action. And
let me go back here.
I would love to see that a little more clearly.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Oh, on the one with the blaze on his nose.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of detail that I had to tease out of that in an ACR.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the lighting was just so horrible.
Yeah.
They were practically in silhouette on that side.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it looks like
HDR.
Pretty harsh light.
Auto bracket.
Boy, with this kind of movement, you'd be lucky.
Oh, you really still
those two went at it for about 5 minutes, and they'd make up. I talked with a lady friend of mine who's an equestrian, and she said a lot of times siblings will behave that way, where they'll fight and then they'll be all cuddly and nicey. But I just kept shooting and shooting and shooting these two mares, and they're mares, not stallions. Yeah.
So we've talked about this before, or we've talked about it on Monday mornings. We also talked about it here. But for images like this, I mean, so doing highlight rescue on the raw files, the place where it should be done. On Tony Kuiper's site, there was this whole thing about using these linear profiles. And what linear profiles do is they give you a better starting point. It's basically a true raw file. Whenever you bring a raw file into Camera Raw, there's automatically a profile attached to it. You can't turn it off. So just as an example, let me see, I can't do it with those. Let me go back here. Always go back to the same image we use 100 times for demos on the, I've moved them. Let me see where I put them in here. There. So if I grab a raw file, sharpest, here it is. So if I grab this raw file and I put it into Camera Raw, anytime you put a file into Camera Raw or Lightroom, there's always a profile attached to it right here by default. And you can change the default setting, what you want it to be. But your only choices here are, Adobe Color, Adobe Landscape, Adobe Neutral is about the one that is the closest to the linear profiles. The thing about the profiles is that they don't change any settings in here. So you can see if I go from that one to Adobe Color, which has a lot more contrast to it, these are all still at 0. So the point is that none of these are really getting you at what is really a true raw file. This is a profile that adds contrast, sometimes color saturation, to your image. So somebody kind of came up with the idea and they said, well, I truly want a raw file. And so in that Kuiper website, he's made a whole bunch of them. I'll show them to you. So they're specific to the camera and the model that you're using. So in this case, this camera is a EOS 5D Mark III, and I happen to have one in here, right here, the linear one. So when you load them in, they actually end up inside the profile list here. And under these profiles, it's this one right here. And you'll see in this sky area how much details come back where that was blown out. So if I just, for example, let me go back here because I can do it from here quicker. If I go back to Adobe Color, look how much is blown out here. That's what it would look like when you first come in. If I go to the linear profile, that's how much more detail I have. Now it looks a whole lot more washed out, but the point is none of these have moved yet, so I still have the ability to start adding contrast. Plus, if this was still blown out, I still have this much more room to still recover those highlights. Whereas if I come to Adobe Color and put this back to 0, I only have that much room to and this happens to work pretty good, but down this area it starts to get really limited even at that 100%. So now if I switch from Adobe Color to the linear profile, that bottom even picks up color there. So these linear profiles are really great on images like that horse image when you have areas that have blown out detail. It works really well to bring those details back. So on the Tony Kuiper panel, he has the linear profile repository. This is basically a bunch of information about the linear profiles. There's also a video here on TK Friday, but so here they are here. And so again, by manufacturer, so Canon, Hasselblad, all the names down here, and then Canon, each model has to have its own profile. So somebody has taken, a test target shot, ran it through DNG, stripped out all of the adjustments, made a profile that you then load into Camera Raw or Lightroom. And then now when you go in, depending on the camera that you have, like I probably have about 5 of them loaded into my Camera Raw, but the only one that you'll ever see is the one that relates to the file you brought in. So if I look at my where my linear profiles are, there's only one of them in here, and it's for the Canon. These are other profiles that I made for my lighting setup in my studio, but this is a profile, the linear profile. But I have about 4 other ones in here for other camera manufacturers. So you can only load in the one that matches your camera, and that's kind of how specific they are. So if you're interested, go to the Tony Kuiper site, or even just do that, search for. So his site is Goodlight US, and then or .us, and then linear profiles, linear-profiles. They'll be all listed here, and then there's also a PDF in here on how to install them into Lightroom or Camera Raw. Okay. So do you know, Linda? Do you use them at all?
No, but I'm going to check it out.
So I would say for sure it'd be interesting to see if you went back and redid the horse image. Unfortunately, you did all that work, but it would be just interesting to see from that point of view moving forward on your horse images where they're in that horrible light. Compare that sort of highlight rescue and see if you do get a lot more detail in those areas.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Did I open? I did. So here's the other one that you did, and again, here's the beginning point. So would you even know that the sun thing was generated by AI? And because you've already merged.
Actually, that wasn't AI generated. That was again on one with that sun flare.
Okay, yeah. So so there's another good example, right? So we could use on one flare, but we can't use AI to generate that by certain rules. That's the weird thing. It looks great. I mean, what were the other 2 layers? Retouching.
Did you do anything to try and get more detail in their faces?
I don't know. The problem is because they're backlit.
And see that was that flare. See that circle around them? That was actually from the sun, and I couldn't really correct for that.
So,
obviously,
well, you can. So, sort of back to what we did before too, is that you can kind of make a selection of that, and whether or not it works is anybody's guess. But you could use generative fill on that, and it might actually blend that a little bit softer, to create that transition.
Okay.
There are other ways. I mean, I could probably come pretty close to using a curve and a really soft mask to get that selected. There is a technique for it. There it goes. So it's less harsh there, right?
Oh,
So you
yeah.
can get rid of the
Yeah.
line using that
Yeah,
tool
yeah.
too. The other tool that you can use too is the remove tool. And the only problem with that is you don't get a lot of choices. So let's just say if I come to here, and the same thing on this, you generally are going to want to go, include the edges, because it'll put the line back in. It might move it a little bit, but it'll still do it. So on mine, I made the stroke, and it didn't just do it automatically because I have the box turned off up here that says remove after each stroke. So like if I want to go back and correct something, I can do that rather than waiting for it to process. But so now because I have that unchecked, now I have to like either hit the check mark or hit enter, and it will now. So I could actually draw spots in 3 or 4 places and then just process at one time. So sometimes that box helps speed up that process.
Okay.
And
good
also
to know.
when Don gets me my new computer, it'll speed it up also. But also part of this too is I mean, this is, again, a link between me and Adobe's site, and I'm using, we're online, and whatever my connection speed is right now might not be real great. But so, I mean, you can improve it, right? So that did help
Yeah,
it.
yeah, definitely improves it.
The other technique, let me turn that one off. So the other technique would be to basically, again, get a curve adjustment, and you can kind of do this by using the little scrubby hand and measure, like say this value here. So this is just below that quarter tone. And so I divide this curve up into quarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, up the scale here. So that spot happens to be just below the quarter tone, and this happens to be just above it. So I know that I'm going to need to move this down about to that spot where it's fairly close to where that one was before. And I probably am going to have to also put it on luminosity so that I don't get much of a color shift. And then now again, back to the inverted mask. And now I could do this by maybe, and I'm going to just try it loosely. I'll make a selection and I'll just follow this line. I'm using the mouse instead of my pen, but this would work fairly well. So I could always add to or take away from, but what I'm really after right now is blending this line right here. So again, I probably could have done a better job if I used maybe even the polygon tool, but that's fairly close. Okay, so then if I take that and I fill it with white, so and deselect that now. So now the trick is blending that, and a lot of times it can happen really easily just with this feather adjustment, and you're kind of watching to see how far when that starts to blend right there.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's the off and on, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect.
Oh,
You could
that's
still
really
go back in and maybe add a little more contrast, but it definitely, those little flare spots always feel like they're impossible to paint in, but the real trick is that feathering adjustment. And so you just do the same up there. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Let me do this. So I had one other I guess I already closed it. I had one other adjustment that I did on this one by comparison. So there's that. The only thing is the sun flare for me ends up being almost that paper white color. So I almost always try to put a little more yellow back in here, and it feels a little bit more like warm sunlight. And if you printed this, a lot of times you're going to end up kind of like in that area where there's no ink there. If it measures 255, it becomes even more obvious because it's paper color, whatever color white your paper is, that shows up. So this is just done with the selective color adjustment, and then so it's adjustment layer, selective color, and then in this case I chose whites because that's the center of the sun, and adjusted the white value. So this is selective color here, and so on the panel, it's the last one down here at the bottom of the adjustment layers. And then so I add it, and the way this works is the drop down panel here. Which color do you want to affect? I want to affect the whites, And on the whites, what do I want to do? So these are color corrections. So I want to add yellow, so plus yellow. You'll see the real thing too is to make sure this relative, if it's on relative, you're going to, that blown out spot's still going to be blown out because it's trying to maintain the original luminosity of the image. But when you switch over to absolute, it'll fill every pixel in that area, whether it's 255 or whatever value you're looking at. So with that absolute button, now you just want to draw this back so that it doesn't need a lot, but just so that it's not pure white. And then I also, it looked like when I had this at 0, this looked a little green for some reason. So I also then pulled back a little bit of cyan from those yellows, and it warmed it up a little bit more. Didn't need a lot.
Really
So that's
nice.
kind of the,
Yeah, big improvement.
it even adds more warmth into here where it's slowly affecting that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like
That's
that.
a favorite. No masking. You don't have to do any masking at all. Well, unless there's another white spot in the image somewhere that you don't want to turn yellow, then you want to make sure you mask that part of it out. Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your horse images.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I would like to have wished for you to have better lighting, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, it is what it is. You can't direct them.
Right.
There's no staging.
Yeah. Could you move to the left a little more? All right, Robert. Look at this train.
Yes, sir. This image I took in Colorado. It's a pretty famous place, and it's lit artificially by the people that run the railroad yard. The railroad yards are usually dark. It's all oily, dirty, and dark. So I cleaned up a lot of stuff in the foreground, left it dark, but took out anything that was distracting to the eye that would be bright, and then worked with highlights and shadows along the actual locomotive. And there's a really bright light on the building in the back that I'm going to take out with generative film. And I'm just now in the process of loading the update of Adobe Photoshop because I kind of filled up my hard disk, which you're not supposed to do, so I got to empty some stuff. But I showed this to a couple friends, and of course, if you ask 3 photographers an opinion, you get 3 different answers, of course. I was thinking of maybe using this for the mechanical, like at the fair, they have the, whatever they call it.
All things mechanical or something like that,
Yeah, all things mechanical. This is pretty obvious subject for that. And one person said, well, the story is where these 2 guys are looking at each other, getting this thing ready to roll or whatever they're doing. And so he said, just crop it to the front of the engine and leave all the rest out. You don't need that. It doesn't add to the story. Another person said, no, the story is the loco. It's a national something or other, and it's a big deal because it's rare, etc. So I'm kind of conflicted. I like seeing the whole thing. I'm not a train nut. I have some relatives that are. But is that true? Do you think that the story is really the front part, maybe even in a vertical crop? Or what?
Okay, so
what's the general consensus?
This is what do they call the there's 2 portrait categories. So informal. So this is the informal portrait, and this is all things mechanical. So this, I think the all things mechanical. The stories about the train is great that these 2 guys are there because it's kind of cool, for the image too. But I think if you cropped in on it, it would be, it's a little bit less of the all things mechanical. It becomes a kind of a informal portrait then. Okay. I was going to ask you, so the steam coming off of the whistle back here was this dodged or what? It looks much brighter than, say, the steam coming from here. Or?
No, believe it or not, I haven't really done anything with the steam. There might have been one little fluky piece that went off on its own as the breezes go up and down, and maybe I took that out. But I was wondering if it needed a little bit more to make that more solid, or the same with the smokestack. It's obviously not running, so it's not pumping out this full, huge cloud of smoke, but there's enough to let you know that the boiler is operating, right? It's not sitting there cold.
Right. I don't know. Comments, anybody?
I think you have 2 pictures in this, or you can find another one with the guys and do that separately, or another one with the whole thing and do that separately. I think more contrast for me. It just seems like all the tones are very similar, but it maybe lighten up the steam from the the stack a
Yeah,
little
that's
bit.
what I was thinking. Then this wouldn't stand out so
Really
much.
nice. I like it a lot.
Yeah, the smoke is very gray, and maybe fill in the steam valve there, whatever that is, with the brighter. Because one is smoke and one is steam, so they are different
Right.
tones. But the steam one, should probably fill in that broken area there, huh?
In here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
all right.
Or do
Maybe
you have
also-
several images with the steam from the
Oh, yeah.
whistle that where you like one better than the other, or can work them together, blend them together?
It's possible. I have to go back and look at those. Yeah. I took it from different angles, but this was by far the best because the background was best. There's a lot of clutter in a train yard. And in this case, the building in the back is not distracting. It looks like a warehouse, which is what it is. Is that better, lighter?
No, I was
That's
just looking
global
for.
light.
So you were talking about lightening up the. Let me get this off of overlay. Lightening up the steam or the smoke from here. So it's already got some really cool areas that already have some variations there.
Some contrast.
This is going to have to go. Really. I want to say. Well, it doesn't want to. There we go. So. There we go. Okay, so this is just going to happen very slowly. But I would play with, you could already kind of make out areas where there's a little bit of light there already. So the point is just to kind of exaggerate some of the natural tones that are already there. And it doesn't take a lot.
Yeah.
And so even that little bit there just kind of adds a little bit to
What tool were you?
So this is just, so it's a curve adjustment. I just brightened up the curve, put a black mask on it, took a brush and painted at 10%, several little strokes. Probably
Good.
should have used.
And the curve was global. You were lightening the whole thing.
Yeah, except for I put the black mask on it, so that takes the effect away.
Exactly.
Now, so this is in fact part of that class that I'm going to be doing for polyphoto for polyphoto is this idea that I use curves more to burn and dodge, lighten and dark with than I do a burn and dodge tool. The burn and dodge tool has to be done on a pixel-based layer. So even if you make a gray fill layer and burn and dodge on that layer, for me, this is just way more forgiving in the sense that I also have the ability here. I can come back in and once I've made the mask, I can kind of play with this value here. Plus, I still have, in this case, I can not only brighten it, but I could also add contrast if I wanted to. So I can reshape the curve. If it was a color image, I could also go in and do color balance where I could change the color using this type of a lighten and darken layer. So it's way more flexible, I think, than using a burn and dodge tool directly on a pixel layer or creating that burn and dodge layer. I still use the burn and dodge layer. That was part of the Kuiper panel here. He uses it as there's a shortcut there too. The one thing I was going to mention, and again, I've always mentioned if anybody's interested in this action, and for most black and white images, this mid-tone contrast action is a lot of times the make or break of an image. And it was originally created by Mac Holbert, who worked for Graham Nash at Nash Editions years ago when they were printing for a lot of people. And they were doing a lot of black and white images. And Holbert said, it just seemed like every digital black and white image needed mid-tone contrast. And he says, I got tired of messing around trying to figure out how to do it, so I made an action for it. Then John Paul Caponegro, which is this one here, the JPC one, his is made exactly the same way, but it's a little more aggressive. So I usually use this one. So if I highlight that and run it, it'll add this mid-tone contrast. Let me close this now. So it creates this upper layer, and if I turn this off and on, you'll see what it starts to do. And you, in this case, because there's no sky values next to it, it comes in at 50%. I could always increase it if I want to. I could also mask it. So let's just say if I thought, okay, it works really great in here, and this all starts to look more like metal now, right? But maybe
I was just going to say that it's more metallic.
Yeah, maybe it's
more metallic.
Maybe it's too heavy on those guys. So you could go to the mask easily enough and take a brush and again, say at 50%, I could paint some of this stuff out so that it's not quite as aggressive on these flesh tones, some of these other highlights maybe at 50%. So you can really control where the strength of this thing happens. And so now, this is at 96%. I'll turn that off and on. Yeah, just the train just comes alive.
Wow.
So the way this
He's
is
alive.
created
Wow.
is this layer is a high pass filter. So under filter, other, and high pass. So it creates this high pass filter. And then with the high pass filter, it goes into overlay mode, and that normally just adds contrast to an image. And then this little double square thing here lets you know that inside the layer styles, there's a blend if function here. So without this, it would have added contrast to all the tones. And so this is really the secret behind his midtone thing is this says, don't add any contrast to the extreme shadows and taper it off from here to here, which is a value of 25 to 45. So from here to 45, there's a 0 to barely any adjustment. On the high end, same thing. So from 235 down to 215, there's no contrast being added here. And between the numbers 45 and 215, all the contrast is being added right there. So this is like having a shadow and a highlight mask that blocks the effect out of there and only allows that additional contrast to happen in the midtones. So very cool. You have to be careful about that. It does, if you had a sky here, continuous tone sky, you can start to get halos if you crank it up this far. So normally 30 to 50% is enough, but in this case, this image could easily handle it. You just have to look and see if it causes any ghosting anywhere. And there is a little bit like in these tones right in here, but it doesn't look unnatural because the train is full of weird kind of tones next to each other.
You say that subject you get away with a lot because it's
the only thing
weird
that
anyway.
you have to be aware of is this. If you only had a single layer, your original background layer, and you wanted to run this, it won't run on its own because it needs to at least have two layers for it to work, because that's written into the action. So if I tried to run it without it, it would stop it it would say, can't run it, or you need a second layer. So you need to at least duplicate the background layer, then run it. But normally this is a end of the line function where you've already got maybe 5 or 6 adjustment layers, and now you're at the end of it and you want to add that last bit of contrast. So part of the action, it always puts this up at the very top layer, and then you adjust it from there.
That's wonderful.
That's a great tool.
I think I have those midtone actions from one of your webinars.
I've always given it out on webinars and things. So, but if anybody's interested, just send me an email. Say send me the midtone action, and I'll email it to you.
I forgot I had that. I feel silly.
That's a great image, Robert.
Yeah.
I think what I would do, looking at the image, let me come back here. So, and now it's kind of baked in here too, but I think I would probably, let me see what it looks like on that. Yeah. So I would mask it out of here, right? Because it kind of makes this stand out even more. So it's bumping up that contrast in here. Yeah, kind of missed. But I'd paint it out of there completely because it already has enough contrast there. All right, very cool.
And what up the people? Any suggestions on the guys? I mean, they're good props and they add scale, but I don't know whether they should be muted down more or I don't know. The faces are pretty bright as is, but just enough to see them.
Yeah, I think it works.
Yeah. I like them a lot. The guy's neck on the right.
Kurt.
I couldn't hear that
go
again.
Ahead. Kurt was echoing.
Who?
Go ahead, Ann.
Okay, so yeah, I like the guys in there a lot. I think the guy on the right, maybe his neck is a little bright.
Yeah. You may be right. Mm-hmm. Do you find the very front, that plate in the front, too bright? Does it distract from the guys, or is that, it looks very metallic, and that I like.
No.
On the one that I did with the additional midtone contrast, I'd be careful how much is there. Like if I go back to yours, there's yours. That's the midtone contrast. So in some places, it gets a little bit aggressive, and I would paint them out at 50%. This area in here looks really cool with it. So you can kind of play with where you would want that tone to appear. All right, and then
thank you.
No train, but where was this?
Where's the train? This is in Kona.
Oh yeah, you wrote
and,
that in the thing.
And I'm on the beach photographing some turtles late in the day. The sun's going down, and somebody behind me, a stranger, says, "Oh my God, look at the rainbow!" And I turn around, and I go, "Oh, geez, look at that!" So I got some shots. I had a tripod with me. Wasn't using it at the moment, but I grabbed it, set it up, and I didn't know everything was moving rapidly. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I, fast as I could, grabbed at least the rainbow. It looks like a laser. Somebody's shooting a laser at the Earth. But I wanted to enhance it in a way that it would be as dramatic in the photo as I saw it with my eyes. This is, I think, the original here. The other one is with some enhancements.
No, this is the one that I made some suggestions on.
Is this the one that we're looking at now?
No, that's yours.
That's mine. Okay. And it seems to me there needs to be a little more detail in those highlights. The sun is hitting the tops of those clouds and making them nice and warm, and underneath where it's dark, it's not getting the light. The sun is close to the horizon, and so the land is getting some of those last rays of light. I wondered, should those be brought up lighter and warmer to set up more contrast on the land? And that white line, see, that's a lava field there, and that white line is a road. It's a highway. And in mine, I just actually painted it out. I found it very distracting. But I think the lava's too dark. I really need to maybe...
Well, if I actually bring this, I mean, if I blow that up, there's quite a bit of detail in these shadows. So I don't know that... I mean,
okay.
I would also take most of this out of it anyhow, because, I mean, the clouds and the rainbow thing is the most exciting part about it. So I got these files kind of late, so I didn't get a chance to look at them or do a whole lot to them. But I think this area over here draws you kind of away from the rainbow. So I think these lighter areas I would darken. The thing I looked at doing was darkening the top of the cloud. So if I go back now, it's not a big difference, but it's enough. Actually, there's a weird thing there. I don't know why it's doing that. Let me pull out of there.
It isolates it a little more.
Let me open this. I don't know why it looks. There's a weird square edge here that shouldn't be there. Yeah, it's there. What is it? That's weird because I don't see it here anywhere. Was it in the original? Yeah, it is. Weird. So there's something going on in that corner. There's a corner. Did you fill a corner?
Oh, I see it now.
Did you fill that corner or do something? Or
if I did, I'd probably use the linear gradient and maybe did not feather or do something to make it blend better. I don't remember. But that, I see the line now. See what you're saying?
Yeah. When I darken, or just figure out if there's a mask or something there that's making it show up. But
that's weird.
I just thought that the having that light up at the top again sort of draws you off to the edge of the image. And when this is darker like that, then this light even becomes more amazing. I started to play with, but I didn't get anything that I thought worked real well, so I couldn't give you any more information. But it feels like this middle section, probably if it's raining or whatever, it feels a little bit flat, and I don't know if it's the atmosphere or whatever, that you're shooting through, or the rain or whatever. But
I think it is raining back there. There was a report of storm moving toward the coast from the other side, and eventually that came to where we were.
But wow, beautiful. Beautiful to be there.
But what about maybe, would you crop from the left at all? I'm bothered by the way the cloud tapers down and then gets lopped off.
Maybe. Let's see. Oops.
I guess I like that
better.
Putting
this even more dead center, but
that's the bad news. If you crop too much, all that nice light, warm color.
I don't know. Any comments? Anybody have a feeling about the crop or anything to be changed? I love seeing the foreground. I think does help. I would retouch those.
I suppose you could try cropping from the right to where that rounded cloud is.
To here?
And then a little bit to the end, to the right end of that rounded cloud where it's shadowed there. Mm-hmm.
I like the whole
I don't know.
circle of the clouds.
Yeah. I like the shape of this because of the cloud. Go ahead, Kurt.
Well, yeah, I'd probably crop a slight bit in from the left, and in the upper right-hand corner where it goes blue, I might take that corner out, take that blue out by copying in some of the clouds, and some thoughts on that.
That makes sense. It does take your eye out.
Yeah, that blue upper right corner kind of pulls your eye into that corner.
That little bit here.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a nit, but I wonder if that would look better if it was cloud-like and not blue. So
I think you're right. That makes sense.
Content-aware fill would probably help that too. Do you have two devices on, Kurt? Because it seems to be echoing. Okay, you got my vote on that corner. It is sometimes those things feel like, yeah, that's nitpicky, but
yeah, that works. That works well.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the lack of contrast in the middle or the ground is really atmospheric.
Yeah.
It's rainy, and they don't just get mist. It rains hard. Maybe a little bit on the left too, but then it put.
I mean, this is one of those situations where, okay, so yeah, the rainbow's in the middle of the frame, and no matter what you kind of try to do to crop it, it doesn't seem to help it. So let's try one more thing.
what would it look like if you took that white line out in the foreground? I'm just curious.
This one here, yeah, we were saying that. So
yeah, it's a highway, and that white line is really distracting to me. Anything that's a line, if it's not enhancing the subject, it's a nightmare.
What adjustment did you use to take it out?
The remove tool.
Which?
That's weird. It copied that.
Where,
so it's part of the. Well, I have it located here with my spot healing and healing brush. But I think when you.
It would be good.
For some reason, Kurt's still echoing. For some reason, I think when you first load the newest version of Photoshop where they included it, if you come down here to the edit toolbar, for some reason it seemed like it ended up somewhere else in here, and so you can rearrange. And actually, it was over here in the extra pile, but so I could put it anywhere. And the thing to be aware of is, like, if you're using, like I use a lot of different workspaces here, is when you create a new workspace, if you don't check these three boxes, if you've moved in a new tool to the toolbar or located things, then you change from one space back to that space, it'll disappear again. I've had problems like that where I thought, well, where the hell did the tool go? And it's like, oh, okay, when I created my new workspace, I didn't tell it to include any changes that I made to keyboard shortcuts, menus, and toolbar. So once you've located it where you want to go, then like I said, on this particular adjustment here, the edit toolbar, you can actually drag tools anywhere you want. You can put them in any order you want. You can also take tools out of here. If I don't use certain tools, you can take them out and save that as a different sort of workspace, but it won't remember it automatically by itself. So you got to make sure.
Fantastic.
Put it so, like, you can see if I go some of the preset workspaces, like let's see, those are mine. There's down here, essentials. And so a lot of times on essentials, there's certain tools that should be in here, or even in the photo one, photography. So in the photo one, there's some tools in here that I don't remember which ones they are, but there's some of them that are missing because they're not part of the automatic setup, and so they've created a whole new toolbar setup for that particular workspace. So I don't remember which one I was using now. I'm usually using my TK9 new, and so yeah, that's that tool. So for some reason, I don't know why and you hardly ever see that this tool will do that, but I will. So the other and one thing, the healing brush tool, the one that, because sometimes most people will just use the healing brush tool where you paint over it, but the one I have selected right now wants you to make a selection. I've gone back to using it more than I use the other one, because this one gives you more control over what you're going to actually heal into that space, where the other one, if you just paint over it, it's going to arbitrarily grab crap that you don't know specifically where it's going. So those are, I mean, I think, getting rid of those things are great. I was going to try one more thing to see if it actually helps, or if it'll even work. So I want to go to content aware move, and I don't know if it'll actually do a good job because of that mountain range. But so this is like, again, trying to get around that, where it's located in the image, and see if it actually, the mountain's going to be the tricky part, but maybe I can make it line up like right about there. Oh, and here's the other thing too. I mean, this is recent in the last few iterations also, is on the content aware move, once it lands, you can also then scale it if you want to. So if you wanted to, say pull this up so that the thing actually goes a little higher into the cloud, or if you've moved it from a foreground to a background, those are things that you can take control of. So the difference here is that it attempts to make the repair over here, but they do a really great job. So I would say, no, this doesn't work real good.
Can't have everything.
No. Sometimes you can't have anything. All right. Cool image.
Well,
all right.
Good suggestions.
Thank you for sending them.
It's good.
And
I'll go back
if I've got
corner.
Oop, I just thought I unzipped these, Marianne. And this is our last one. We always go long. Let's see here. Especially if you guys let me get carried away. Control C. Up one. Doesn't want to do that. All right, back. We'll drag them. In fact, I think that's what I ended up doing last time. I thought, unless I put them into somebody else's folder. That happens sometimes too. Really? Come on. I think my computer says, no, we're done. We're done for the night. All right. There they go. All right. All right. So for those of you that don't know Marianne, she's been working on it. How long have you been working on this project that you have going?
Oh my God, for a long time.
So she does these underwater photographs, and she's compositing, and the project is about sort of women. How would you word your project?
How would I word?
Do you have a title for your project already, or I mean, you've said before.
Yeah, I can read it really quick, just a little bit. My underwater photography salutes a woman's strength in an ever-changing world where we continue to navigate turbulent currents. And a lot of my, let's see, water is life. So I take my camera and photograph the women who courageously swim against the undertow that tries to stifle our cries for equality and fundamental rights. But united we rise and boldly breach forbidden horizons to breathe free. So,
Something like that. No, really good. Excellent. So, so we've looked at on Monday morning. We looked at several of these. I don't think we. I think I remember seeing this one before. No, I haven't seen any of these. These are all new. Yeah. So did you have any specific questions, or just like, hey, let's just talk about it as?
well, yeah, basically it's pretty much like due next week. And if someone sees, I just want people's opinions of how I could alter it to make them look better.
All right.
That one that was just before this one, it has a black area that needs to be cropped
On
off.
the edge there.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Eagle eyes.
I like them with the bubbles. The one with the four gals, they don't seem to have bubbles, which doesn't ground the scene for me.
I forgot the bubbles. I finished that today.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to open this one too. And again, it seems like too that for whatever reason, most of the images that I see from these series you're on, they always seem to feel a little bit flat. And so I don't know if they're looking, more contrasty at your end, back to, when Joan said about calibrating the monitor. So if I were going to, again, if I just pull up a curve, and I mentioned this before, so on the curve, you can set it up so you can see the histogram inside the curve, or you can actually open up a whole histogram panel. But the cool thing about it being here is what you start to recognize is, so there's no shadows and there's no highlights in the image. Everything is kind of, again, when you divide this up into the quadrants, everything falls into sort of this lower, below mid-tone quadrant. So it's heavily, populated in that one area. So the a lot of times, if you use the histogram as a way to monitor where the shadows and highlights begin. So if I pull that over, and it's hard to see down here where it actually begins, but I could also, there's two things you could do is that if you hold down Alt or Option on the keyboard, you'll get this temporary threshold image, and as you pull it over, you'll start to see certain channels that will start to become visible. So there's the blue tone there's some magentas, and until you actually see a black, which is happening over here, you actually don't have a maximum black in the image. And I'm not saying that every image needs a maximum black or that this needs one also, but the point is you can see how far away, and if you use the numbers even at the start of the histogram here, this value of 26 is now a 0, so that means the darkest tone in this image fell around 26, which is like nowhere near a black. And so that's kind of a starting point to figure out whether contrast is correct or not. Not that I would go that deep with it. And then same thing on the high value. If I hold down Alt or Option and click, I get a black threshold, and when the whites or the colors start to show up, those are the first values that have the most contrast. So again, even if I back it off just to that point there, it's 197 is where something has just started to turn to the 255, which is going to be those brighter values you saw up there. But right now, if you just look at that image and you turn this off and on, you kind of see that contrast. Now that's just the two extreme ends. Now we have sort of from the midtones, we can brighten it up or darken it and figure out, how bright you want the image to be, but still hang on to the contrast at both ends. And so if I just look at that, just that little change by itself, definitely helps the image a lot. So I would pay attention to those tones. And it seems like, and it may be intentional or not, but like this model here seems to be even a little bit less contrast. So I know you're working in layers, so you could still go back in and adjust. Like this model looks pretty good now. This one looks good. This one could use a little more. This one feels like it could use a lot more. So you could go back in and put curves on the individual models to balance out the contrast. And like we said before, if the colors become too intense or too colorful, then just change the blend mode to luminosity. I think it looks flat, the colors, so I would leave it set to normal, because one of the pluses is as you gain contrast, you also gain saturation. So you could separate it and say, make this into a luminosity layer, then add a hue saturation layer and bring the color up. But you have, since it's already done it in one move, I would just go ahead and say, let's just leave it set to normal. But I think it's a cool image. I agree with Ann. I think the bubbles do help the underwater effect a lot.
I was in a rush.
And I know I've seen on some of your other images before, like this behind her, is this a shadow that you added?
Yeah.
So I would take it out.
Where
I don't know that it needs one, because that's just so that area where the shadows fall in is so far away from her. And actually with the overhead light, it would actually darken somewhere down here probably. This shadow would indicate that the light is coming from forward towards her, even if her face really looks like the light's coming down on her, even on her leg, light here, shadow there, so the shadow should fall kind of equally. I like this image a lot. Again, I think the ones where you've added the fish, I mean, this has some looks like some natural ones, and it's hard to tell that. The fish look great. I think this one has a similar contrast problem there too.
Yeah, I'll fix that. I can see it a lot now.
That first one's great. Did you photograph your models in a swimming pool and then add that as part of add the background and everything else, or how? Or is it top presumption? I'm just curious how you do this.
I didn't use any AI generated. Every picture, even the bubbles, came from my camera. So I take pictures in the ocean, like this is the bottom of the ocean in Greece. And then there's like Hawaii and Florida bottoms of oceans, and I photograph women in pools, and then I composite them into the picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a diver then, huh?
No, it's not really deep.
So you can do that.
I prefer being in water, though.
I'm sorry. What did you say, Marianne? I missed it.
Oh, I said I prefer being in water.
Really?
My favorite place to be.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Except when it's 58 degree water.
Yeah. There's that.
I could do 64. I can do 64.
That's a good pose there. I really like that. That's great.
On this one, I would ask about the bubbles in location to the fish. Do the fish really blow bubbles? I don't I don't know.
Can I make one comment on the multiple image with the 4 gals?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know this is probably nitpicky. You can hate me forever, but I'm curious as to why we have 2 that are interacting with each other. The image, it's
Can you go in closer so you can see her face?
Yeah, her eyes are closed.
Is the part of the story that she's standing on another woman's shoulder to get higher?
Yeah.
Is there a metaphor there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And this will be like a 24 by 36, so it will be obvious.
All right. I wondered because
He's going to help her.
Like it
He's
would just
going to
jump.
help her.
That's really cool. There's a whole story there. Wow. That's great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think the models
The
models need a different amount of contrast in the background. So that I think helps the models a lot more, but I think the background doesn't need near as much. Somewhere in there.
I made the sky is the broken ice.
Yeah, you did one of those for Monday. I think that's a. So go ahead and tell them how you did the broken ice idea.
Well, this one's not as obvious, but I have one where she's really close to the ice, and it looks like glass, and she's breaking through it. And then
I'd watch
this one. I just take a tray of water, freeze it, and then I smash it, and then I take a picture of it, and then I put it in the picture.
A great
And I
idea.
put it on luminosity, I
There's a
believe.
little bit of a hard edge there too. I don't know what that, again, little masking or something causing that straight line.
How do you find your models? You just go grab neighbors and say, put on this dress and jump in the pool, and they look at you like, what?
Yeah. Well, if actually sometimes I just meet them. I went into the Kurt's camera the other day, and this woman had long hair, and she looked like she could be a mermaid. And I asked her, and so I get phone numbers that way. And then I ask a friend, and then a friend has friends, and it's really fun.
But there is a distinct advantage of being a woman asking another woman to.
Hey, we could
We
not
would get-
do that. You
We would
realize
get
we
slapped right in the middle of the store. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and then there's Judy, who approaches strangers and
Yeah,
asks
Judy's
them
got
to wear out.
Judy's got complete strangers dressing up in weird costumes on the dunes and
Yeah, do you mind putting this on?
Yeah.
yeah.
Like a photograph.
I like this one. I like it a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Stalker.
beautiful.
What a cool concept.
Yeah.
I love metaphors anyway. Really neat.
All right.
When you add bubbles to the 4 gals, be sure that that bubbles collect under the ice and kind of spread out maybe.
There's kind of some here now.
I don't.
And
That's
when you have ice and there are bubbles coming up from underneath, the bubbles
They get-
collect underneath
they
the
get
ice
trapped.
and kind of just get trapped.
Oh. Okay. I have some bubbles that are in
Oh.
ice that I can just put in here. It's a
You
good
might
point.
Google bubbles caught under ice or something so you can see what
Yeah.
it looks like.
Yeah.
All right. We are going to. Did anybody else send something that we didn't get to? I didn't see in my email
Thank you.
anything. That Marianne was the last one who sent me something. All right. So sorry we went a little long, but sometimes it's worth it.
Learning.
Kurt said send me a. Nope. Okay. So thanks everybody for sending your images tonight, and thanks for everybody jumping online. Thanks for the new people for finding us and showing up. That's always great. And
Thank you, Larry. This is fabulous that you do this for us.
I've been doing this for 20 years. Well, longer than that. I did a presentation on critiques one year at the fair, so it made me stop and look and go back. And I estimated between the critiques that I do for my own things, for the things I've done at the fair, things I've done for Oceanside Museum of Art and camera clubs, I've done over 500 nights of critiques. And when I first came up with the number, I go, "There's no way that could be true." And so I went back and did it again, and I go, "No, it is. It's about 500 nights of doing critiques." But I do, and I've talked about it before. But I still, I took a class when I was in junior college, and it was basically a critique class with the teacher, and there was 10 of us in the class, and I learned more in that critique class than I did in any other class I ever took. And it was just like, God, where else can we go to do this sort of like look at people's images and talk about them? And there just wasn't much out there. And so as just an extension of doing the workshops, a friend and I 2 years ago decided, well, let's do a critique night. And so I was living up in Orange County at the time, and we were like 1990 or 91. We did these critiques starting at the Irvine Fine Arts Center. And the group that I started up there is still meeting today. Two guys kept it going after I moved, and so it's been going now for almost 30 years, which is, I think, well, it's incredible, but it's also mind-boggling to think that you started something like 30 years ago and it's still there. So pretty cool.
Well, kudos to you. It's really beneficial. I know I learned a lot.
Excellent.
I'm looking forward to seeing your thing on Saturday. I'm gonna watch that one too.
All right. Yeah. Excellent.
Is that an online thing with your printer, or you'll be there?
It's online. Yeah. I hope so. No,
Where do I
is.
find
was gonna say, I hope so, because I'm going to be online. But it is, yeah.
And one of these days, Larry will do a workshop.
I know.
again.
Osea
Those are-
keeps bugging me to do that.
Hey.
Just haven't had any time to put one together.
We're on TK9.
Well,
It's time.
And I'm gonna give everybody just a little quick preview here. Tony Kuiper just put out a new TK Magic Mixer, and this is phenomenal idea. Actually, it's using the channel mixer to create black and white images. You can also use it in color, but just as an example, there's a little mixer button here that just starts playing with the channel mixer. So you can see up here in the panel here, it actually opens up the channel mixer. But he reorganized the look of the channel mixer, so rather than having just these color lines here, he's saying if you want to darken things that are red or lighten things that are blue, you can actually adjust these values here. Plus, just like on his panel, you can use the channel mixer with different channels here. Instead of just being the RGB channel, you could actually use it on, look at that one, the cyan one. You can actually use the black and white adjustment. And then if you hit this randomizer, it'll just keep going through and randomizing the settings. And then when you find something, they go, oh, that's pretty cool. Let me see what is here. And then they'll say, oh, maybe want to increase the contrast. Maybe more of that for this image, and then I also want to maybe darken or lighten certain colors, but so yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. It's a $10 plugin that he sells, and right now you should be able to find someplace on you can get it for $7.50. It seems kind of funny that you could buy this thing for $7.50. Who sells anything for $7.50 anymore? But kind of cool. I'm anxious to play with it because I think it's kind of has some potential for some possibilities. So look it up. Look it up on Tony Kuiper's site. You got a lot of Tony Kuiper homework. So you got his luminosity panels, the new Magic Mixer, and the linear profiles. Bob, I would definitely recommend looking into those linear profiles, especially like with images that Linda had with those, where you have that contrasty light and it's the only light you have when you're photographing. So trying to rescue those high values, it's a great tool for that. And it's free.
Larry, would you mind typing the URLs for both of those sites that you mentioned in the chat so I can see it? There was one for the for the neutral profile, and the other for, what was the other one you mentioned? Well, there we go.
So yeah, if you just do a Google search, if you just put in Tony Kuiper linear profiles, it'll bring it up.
Okay.
And
we're gonna take a screen.
Do a screen capture.
I like screenshots.
It's also it's all part of his regular website. So even if you let me think about this. Tutorials, blog gallery.
Yeah, take a
screenshot
because you can see the URL right up there. It's good light.
Goodlight.us. I Google search Tony Kuiper profiles or just get to his website. But this will get you to all of the panels and videos. So here's the new one. Here it is here. TK, $10. And here it is here. So Magic 25. If you put that in, you'll get it for $7.50. There's a limited time on it, so if you're interested, do it soon. All right, we'll wrap it up here. If anybody has any questions, you can send me emails. If you're interested in those actions, send me an email. And like I said, the video will be posted tomorrow sometime on my YouTube channel. So again, you can search that. And that's it. So good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Larry. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.